Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
There were times when Lin Li would seem to suddenly recall something that would spur him to rummage through the pile of drafts to pick out a few crumpled balls of paper. However, most of the time, he would crush the sheets of paper into balls and throw them back into the pile of drafts disappointedly after reading them several times. Just like that, Lin Li became immersed in the algorithms of Frankie magic formula, and the rows of bookshelves in the study were gradually becoming empty. Almost every inch of space he was seated on was covered in magic books that he had tossed aside, and the discarded piles of drafts that he had scribbled messily on. Time passed, day after day. Lin Li almost forgot about the people and everything outside, as well as the purpose of his visit, and the doubts he had. In fact, he even forgot what he was trying to crack the Frankie magic formula for. Lin Li almost put all the irrelevant matters in the back of his mind for the sake of the seemingly simple formula. His only goal left was to crack the formula. A month had passed, and Lin Li had already emptied a large part of the bookshelves in this study, while all the magic books that he had read were strewn across the ground randomly. However, his frown had turned into a bump, and he had discarded plenty of quills. The drafts that he had thrown had covered almost the entire ground. Another month passed. By now, the bookshelves in the study were already empty. Lin Li had already memorized the content of the magic books. Despite being a sanctuary powerhouse, he looked rather haggard at this point. Clearly, he had exhausted plenty of effort on the Frankie magic formula. 2 months had passed. If Lin Li had spent 2 months studying the Divine Smith level Mageth, he should have already gotten an outcome by now. However, Lin Li still couldn't crack the magic formula, and the countless drafts that he had discarded were enough to bury someone. He had applied some little-known magic principles and theories, but it all seemed to just be a waste of paper. Fortunately, Lin Li had already memorized the contents of those magic books, so he didn't have to waste time looking through them for reference when doing his calculations, and he was much faster at calculating than before. 3 months passed, followed by 4. Lin Li's face looked increasingly haggard, but a glint of wisdom gradually appeared in his eyes. If one were to look him in the eye, they would feel as if they were facing a wise man who had 1,000 years of wisdom and had gained insight into everything in the world. It was as if all the mysteries of this world would be unraveled in his eyes. However, Lin Li slowed down in his calculations, and he would often have to think for a long time before he could write a line of characters on the piece of paper. After doing so, he would immediately turn as still as a statue and keep his eyes fixed on the characters that he had written, not moving an inch at all. In the blink of an eye, Lin Li had already spent nearly 6 months in the study. However, haggard was now an understatement when describing his appearance. He was so frail and exhausted that it seemed that a gust of wind would blow him onto the ground. His eyes were terrifyingly bloodshot because he hadn't had any shutai in 6 months and had expended a lot of his energy. Even a sanctuary powerhouse wouldn't be able to withstand such torment. However, the light in Lin Li's eyes became increasingly brighter, as if there was infinite wisdom condensing within them. Finally, on this day, Lin Li's quill snapped with a loud pop as he drew a hard stroke on the piece of paper. However, joy was written all over his face as he kept staring at the draft in his hand like it was an ultimate treasure, completely ignoring the broken quill. PFFF. Lin Li took a long breath and even felt a little dizzy when he stood up. However, the joy on his face did not diminish at all. Although he had gone through great pains and put in plenty of effort into deciphering the Frankie magic formula, the results he gained were definitely worth everything he had committed to it. Although he wouldn't achieve godhood and become a supreme powerhouse just by deciphering a formula, he could be said to have sorted out all of his magical knowledge in the process of deciphering. The benefits of that were even better than achieving godhood. The process of cracking the formula could be likened to ridding one's body of all impurities, strengthening it. However, the process of deciphering the Frankie magic formula was to remove all the impurities from the magical knowledge in his memory. Lin Li was indeed a magical prodigy. Within a few years of coming to Anral, he had already reached a height that others might not reach even after hundreds or thousands of years. However, his quick progress was also the reason that he could more or less ignore the basic magical knowledge and stop paying attention to some unimportant details. The limit of the height of a house was dependent on its foundation, and the same was true for the field of magic. Without a strong foundation, one would still face the risk of collapsing at any time even if they could achieve great progress with excellent talent and luck. The process of deciphering the Frankie magic formula allowed Lin Li to organize almost all the knowledge he had gained in the entire field of magic and rectify many of the issues that he hadn't noticed previously. The foundation of Lin Li's magical theory knowledge had become extremely solid after deciphering the formula. The entire process took him a total of 6 months. With the deciphering of the formula, Lin Li's abilities were also improved rapidly. After the magic formula was cracked, he had already reached level 29 of the Sanctuary Realm. Besides, it had also led to many other improvements. Through his study of the Frankie magic formula, his attainments in the field of inscription had also improved significantly. He was now only one step away from the Divine Smith level. After sorting out all the knowledge he had gained during this period of time, Lin Li finally realized that he had been here for too long, and it was time to leave. He wondered how much had changed in the world outside over the past 6 months. Although Lin Li had already memorized the content of all the magic books on the ground, he didn't leave them lying there, and instead stowed them all away in his Ring of Endless Storm. He planned to place them in the Tower of Dusk's library when he returned, which would be a great benefit for the mages of the Tower of Dusk. After packing up, Lin Li walked to the door of the study. Just like when he entered, the door was left ajar, and the little skeleton outside seemed to have been standing there all this while. Upon sight of Lin Li, the little skeleton finally moved. He stepped forward and bowed to him respectfully before saying, "My respected master, congratulations on having obtained what the previous master left behind. Are you ready to head back now?" Lin Li nodded, and casually asked, "How long have I been in there?" "Master, you've been inside for 20 days, the little skeleton said in a flat tone of voice, as he walked beside Lin Li on their way back. However, when Lin Li heard that answer, he couldn't help but stop in his tracks with some surprise on his face. Although there was no sunrise and sunset in that room, and he had also lost track of time because of how immersed he was in deciphering the magic formula, he had deduced based on his understanding of the laws of time, that he had been inside for nearly 6 months. Was there a manipulation of the laws of time involved? Lin Li immediately thought of a possibility. In fact, it wasn't that unusual of a practice, because there was a mage that could alter the laws of time to speed up the growth of some plants and animals in the special training room of the Tower of Dusk. Another instance was also when Lin Li used his domain world to change the laws of time, when he faced High Priest Power back then. However, the control of the laws of time in the study was clearly much more advanced than Lin Li's. Firstly, it managed to go unnoticed by Lin Li, a sanctuary powerhouse, which was something that ordinary time manipulation methods could not achieve. A sanctuary powerhouse's mastery of the laws had already reached a considerably high level, a notch higher, and they would go beyond the laws to achieve godhood. Hence, the changes in the laws hardly went unnoticed by sanctuary powerhouses. However, despite having stayed in the study for such a long time, Lin Li didn't sense that anything was amiss at all, as everything felt exactly the same as outside. That was enough to show how advanced Garesco's means were. Of course, Lin Li only felt a slight feeling of surprise, which soon faded when he thought of the Divine Smith level Mageth and the gods that had been suppressed. After following the little skeleton out of the mage tower, he soon reached the bottom of the crack. Since the little skeleton had to stay here to continue to look after everything, Lin Li flew up from the rift using the power of flight. The teams of the Tower of Dusk and the Illuminati had been waiting outside the rift for more than 20 days. The team of the Tower of Dusk naturally had to follow Lin Li everywhere. On the other hand, the Illuminatis team couldn't leave in advance, because Lin Li was here to help them, and they didn't know what was going on in the rift just now. Although Lin Li had already helped the Illuminati draw the Mageth, befriending a guru of inscription was equally important to the Illuminati. Fortunately, after waiting for more than 20 days, they finally saw a figure flying straight out from that rift. Of course, before determining who the person was, the two teams remained vigilant and put their guard up. After all, they had felt from the rift countless powerful and terrifying auras that left them with no choice but to be extremely careful. When the figure flying out of the crack stopped in midair, Edmund and the others could ascertain from his clothing that he was Master Felix, whom they had been waiting for. Hence, Edmund and Zoomer immediately went forward to receive Lin Li, unable to conceal the joy on his face. However, just as Edmund and Zoomer were approaching Lin Li, they suddenly stopped, while their faces stiffened immediately because they both felt as if Lin Li had seen through their souls when he merely cast a glance at them. A strange sense of fear and horror even instantly surged from the bottom of their hearts. How is this possible? Edmund, who had snapped back to his senses, still felt an uncontrollable sense of fear when he recalled the way Lin Li had glanced at them. Although Edmund was no longer as condescending towards Lin Li as he used to be in the past, it was mostly because of Lin Li's attainment in the field of inscription. To Edmund, a peak sanctuary realm powerhouse, Lin Li's strength wasn't exactly significant. However, Edmund now felt that he couldn't see through Lin Li's abilities at all. It wasn't that Lin Li was concealing them, but rather Lin Li's strength had reached a height that he could no longer estimate easily. That idea made Edmund extremely frightened. It has only been 20-odd days. What exactly is in that rift? It actually made his strength improve to such an extent. Of course, although he was curious, he didn't have any intentions to go out and explore. After all, the demigod-level skeleton had mentioned before that Lin Li was the owner of everything in the rift. While Edmund and Zoomer were feeling shocked by Lin Li's strength, Lin Li had also descended from mid-air and flown over to approach them. Fulik, what exactly is in that rift down there? Your strength seems to have increased a lot, asked Connorus, who didn't have as many considerations as Edmund and the rest. After all, he was bound with a servant contract to Lin Li, so he immediately asked him some questions out of curiosity upon seeing him. Hearing Connorus' question, Lin Li smiled and said, "Is that so? But I think it'd be better for you not to find out what's down there." It wasn't that Lin Li was being petty. Not everyone in this world was able to face a bunch of confined gods as calmly as he could. Lin Li had received an atheistic education in the world he came from, so he wasn't awestruck even when he saw the gods of this world. However, the people of this world were different because the gods were considered supreme existences to them. Even Connorus, an ancient demon deity, had an ancestral demon that he worshipped. Although these gods had been suppressed, the divinity that escaped was still a great influence for those who entered. Even Connorus would probably lose his sanity because of the divinity. He would either become the divine servant of those gods or lose his mind. Connorus knew that Lin Li had to have a reason for not telling him, so he didn't harp on it, and instead asked Lin Li about his following plans. While Connorus and Lin Li were talking, Edmund and Zoomer walked over too. They had both heard what Lin Li said to Connorus, so neither of them mentioned the matter of the rift, and instead, like Connorus, they asked if they were going to leave this place. However, at this juncture, a terrifying magical wave emerged from the rift behind, as if a volcano had erupted. Immediately after that, a body that was shrouded in flames darted out of the rift and flew into the air like a meteor moving in reverse. With the appearance of this figure, an aura that contained divinity immediately spread throughout the entire space. The members of the Illuminatus and the Tower of Dusk's team immediately became extremely nervous. Even though they couldn't see through the other party's strength, they felt that their souls were engulfed by boundless fear. Edmund and Zoomer were so frightened that their expressions changed drastically. They couldn't be bothered to say anything else to Lin Li, and frantically returned to organize and prepare their team for a battle. They could sense that the power possessed by the figure that emerged from the rift was probably comparable to a demigod. If not on par with that of real gods, it was undoubtedly going to be a tough battle. The figure stopped in midair, but he didn't immediately notice the two teams below. Instead, he looked up to the sky and let out a deafening roar that was full of pain, agony, and anger, as well as a tinge of inexplicable surprise. For a god that had been suppressed for such a long time, during which period his mana was continuously drawn out of his body, like a slave, it was not only agonizing but also a huge insult. If they couldn't control themselves, the gods would have probably extinguished their divine fires after knowing that they could not leave. After venting their anger, the figure finally noticed Lin Li and the others. He could clearly guess that Lin Li had a close relationship with the person who'd suppressed him, and might even be his successor. After being suppressed for thousands of years and having his mana drawn out of him continuously, this god could no longer put into words his hatred for the person who'd suppressed him there. Now that he had guessed that Lin Li might be that person's successor, this deity naturally refused to miss this opportunity for revenge. Hence, the god roared and suddenly extended his arms, after which an erupting volcano appeared behind him. The god of volcanoes. Lin Li could already confirm the identity of the individual who had escaped. The god of volcanoes was just a subordinate god to a main god, the god of divine fire, that mastered the laws of volcanoes, derived from the combination of fire and earth. Even though he was a subordinate god, he was not something that ordinary sanctuary powerhouses could contend with. However, the god of volcanoes had been suppressed in the rift, and had had his mana drawn out of him for a few thousand years. If he'd been suppressed for a few thousand more years, his divine fire might have been extinguished, and he would really have fallen off his pedestal as a god. However, Saint Edmund and the others were unaware of this. All they knew was that the sudden appearance of the figure had placed such great pressure on them, that they almost suffocated. Not to mention the others, even a seasoned peak sanctuary realm powerhouse like Edmund was clearly extremely nervous at this point. In other circumstances, they would at least be able to escape even if they couldn't defeat the god. However, they were now standing in front of the resurrection place of the founding saint, Lord Aquilo. If he were to escape at this time, who knew what would happen to the resurrection of Lord Aquilo? The Illuminati had been working hard towards that goal for thousands of years, and no one was willing to fall into eternal despair again after seeing a glimmer of hope. Edmund, Elder Zoomer, and the other members of the Illuminatus team all seemed to be ready to go all out at this point. For the sake of the resurrection of Lord Aquilo, they wouldn't mind giving up their lives without hesitation even if they were facing a true god. At this moment, Lin Li, however, frowned slightly and muttered, "How could I have been so careless? I let one escape." While saying that, he turned around and raised his arm, pointing at the god of volcanoes who was about to rush over to massacre them. No one knew what was going on. Lin Li turned around and pointed his hand forward, after which numerous dazzling rays of light suddenly emerged from space and extended towards the god of volcanoes who was ready to go on a rampage. The god of volcanoes had those rays of light intertwined around his body when he had just dashed out for more than 10 meters. He instantly let out a loud roar of agony. After being intertwined with the light, the god of volcanoes' body began emitting fumes of black smoke, as if it was firewood that was being burned. He now could not care less about venting his anger on Lin Li and others, as he started struggling and roaring in agony like he was being subjected to torture. The cries and roars of pain made the people below find it unbearable too. If the god of volcanoes was in his heyday, Lin Li wouldn't need to try anymore. He just had to run as far as possible. However, the god of volcanoes had been imprisoned and had his mana stripped away from him for thousands of years. Hence, he had been greatly weakened, and when he escaped, he had similarly paid a considerable price, leaving the level of his strength at that of demigods. Lin Li had even defeated a few ancient gods in Garesco's test. He was definitely capable of defeating this subordinate god, who had more than half of his power removed and was barely surviving. Soon, the god of volcanoes stopped roaring, and his entire body turned into black cracked stone that began crumbling and falling like cooled lava. The astonishment that Edmund and the others felt when a god landed in front of them in the blink of an eye could no longer be put into words. Although they also knew that the god only possessed divinity and did not have much power, Lin Li had handled it too effortlessly. Even if he was just a demigod level enemy, they thought that Lin Li shouldn't have been able to kill him so easily. From the moment he saw Lin Li again, Edmund had already sensed that there was a change in Lin Li, which he couldn't quite put a finger on. After seeing how Lin Li managed to easily kill a god, they felt that Lin Li's abilities were even more mysterious. For Edmund, a seasoned powerhouse, it would be impossible to kill the god of volcanoes easily. Even the Illuminati would have to pay a huge price for it. However, the problem was that Edmund could clearly sense that Lin Li's strength had definitely yet to reach the divine realm, or even the demigod level, which was puzzling for Edmund. Since they were both at the peak of the sanctuary realm, why was there such a huge difference between them? Lin Li, who had just killed a god, acted as if nothing had happened at all. He then turned around and clapped his hands while saying to everyone in the Tower of Dusk, "Okay, everyone, get ready, it's time for us to leave." Edmund's heart was full of bewilderment, but he also knew that he couldn't ask about such things. Hence, he had no choice but to swallow his questions and instruct his team to get ready to leave. However, there was one thing that he knew very well. He had to inform the Illuminati about Lin Li's strength as soon as possible. Becoming enemies with a guru of inscription who was near the divine smith level and could easily kill a god would be an absolutely foolish thing to do. Besides, not only did they have to make sure not to become Lin Li's enemy, the Illuminati also had to resort to some means to improve their relationship with him. That was the only choice that would be in line with the Illuminatus' interests. After the matter of the underground world ended, the teams of the Tower of Dusk and the Illuminati finally returned to the surface of the Cursed Island, where they boarded the star and headed back to Four Seasons Island. At this moment, Grina, the prince of the giant shark clan, seemed to be happier than ever. During the auction previously, he had suffered a considerable loss, as he had not only failed to win the auction of the items he wanted, he even lost a few years' worth of mining rights to the Sea Serpent clan. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have been in a good mood. The reason that Grina was suddenly in high spirits was because the group of seahorse slaves that the Tower of Dusk had bought in advance previously was now standing in front of them. The outsiders had no idea what the seahorse slaves meant to the giant shark clan, but Grina knew that getting his hands on them would be enough to make up for the fact that he failed to bid for what he wanted. The seahorse clan had once ruled the endless ocean, but the royals of the Ocean Dynasty lost their power because they had angered the sea god. However, the Ocean Dynasty had amassed a large amount of wealth that was far beyond what ordinary people could imagine. After the betrayal of the giant shark clan and other major sea clans, the wealth of the Ocean Dynasty was divided and shared among the clans. The share that the giant shark clan had obtained was probably less than 1/10 of the total. The seahorse clansmen that were lucky to have survived would know the answer to where the remaining wealth had gone. Grina had gone to confront the Tower of Dusk, only because he had heard that some of those seahorse slaves seemed to be the descendants of the royal seahorse clan. Of course, the fact that he belittled the Tower of Dusk was also an important reason. Otherwise, if it had been any other force, he would have definitely contemplated if it was worth falling out with them before taking action. Grina waved his hand to have the seahorse slaves escorted away before turning around to speak to Cantori, who had given him the information, with great enthusiasm. "Cantori, my brother, It's all thanks to the news you gave me that I managed to find those damned slaves. In fact, Kantori merely told Grina that Lin Li had left with the core members of the Tower of Dusk. However, Grina couldn't say so, or else it would look as if he was afraid of the Tower of Dusk, though he was indeed unsure if he could really snatch the seahorse Sovs away from Lin Li. On the other hand, Kantori, who had been thinking about how to land Lin Li in trouble, was naturally pleased to see that Grina had snatched away the slaves that Lin Li had bought. However, he was still rather rational. After accepting Grina's thanks, he instructed, "Brother Grina, I'm sure you're aware of the relationship between the kingdom and the Tower of Dusk, so please keep this matter a secret for me." Yes, Grina patted Kantori on his shoulder, but he said with some obvious disdain on his face, "I really don't know what that old fogey Bradler is thinking. Why is he sucking up to the Tower of Dusk? What's so good about the Tower of Dusk? They just have 2 sanctuary realm powerhouses, what's there to be afraid of?" Kantori didn't know how to answer him, and merely shook his head with a bitter smile before bidding him goodbye. In fact, he also wanted to say that not only was the Gilded Kingdom sucking up to the Tower of Dusk, even the Illuminati was just as subservient. However, he couldn't say it, otherwise Grina wouldn't act according to Kantori's wishes. After sending Kantori away, Grina returned to his underwater castle, and couldn't help but laugh while looking at the sky. Since he arrived in the Gilded Kingdom, he had never been as elated as he was now. He could even imagine how furious Lin Li would be when he learned that the seahorse slaves were missing upon his return. Besides, Grina was already prepared to take revenge for the way the Tower of Dusk insulted him in front of the embassy previously by humiliating the members of the Tower of Dusk once they returned. During Lin Li's absence, Four Seasons Island seemed to have barely changed, as it was still full of a festive ambience, with everyone making various preparations for the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration. After a few days of sailing, the huge vessel, the Star, also finally sailed into Helena Port, which was full of festive decorations. Together with the members of the Illuminati, Edmund and Zoomer bid farewell to Lin Li in the port, and got ready to return to the Illuminati to report the results of this operation. However, at this moment, a priest of the Illuminati hurried to the docks and whispered something to Saint Edmund. No one heard what the priest said, but Edmund's face instantly became sullen. Immediately afterwards, Edmund bade goodbye to Lin Li briefly before taking his subordinates away with him. As he left the port, "Damn it, that punk of the Giant Shark clan really doesn't know what he's setting himself up for," Edmund cursed in his heart while taking his subordinates away from the port. There were some matters in the Gilded Kingdom that King Bradler might not be aware of, but there was nothing that the Illuminati wouldn't know about. The things that Grina had done might be hidden from the Gilded Kingdom, but not from the Illuminati. However, the Illuminatus' external affairs had always been handled by Saint Edmund of the Chaos Sanctuary. Hence, the members of the Illuminati reported this matter to him only when he returned. Besides, the Giant Shark clan had 4 other sanctuary-level divine generals, and if the other 3 sanctuaries weren't involved, it would be difficult for the force on Four Seasons Island to handle this matter. In the underwater palace of the Giant Shark clan, Grina was still happily thinking about what he would do to the seahorse slaves, when he suddenly heard the sounds of hurried footsteps. Soon, a guard who had anxiety written all over his face scurried in. When he saw Grina, he immediately called out, "Prince, bad news. The people of the Illuminati are here." "What's so bad about the Illuminatus' arrival?" Grina was puzzled. After all, the Giant Shark clan had been in contract with the Illuminati. Although their relationship wasn't exactly close, they would still be somewhat courteous to each other. Hence, Grina's face turned sullen immediately, and he asked in displeasure, "What do you mean? So what if the Illuminati is here?" "Prince, the members of the Illuminati want you to hand over all the seahorse slaves of the Tower of Dusk immediately," said the guard. "What? They want me to return the slaves?" Grina flew into a rage immediately. What's so great about the Illuminati? Are they really going to fall out with me for the sake of that Tower of Dusk? At this moment, the 4 divine generals also understood what was going on. They didn't think that the Illuminati would really be willing to offend the Giant Shark clan, which was the leader of the 7 hegemons of the sea, just for the sake of the Tower of Dusk. "Prince, why don't we go out and take a look? Maybe it's just someone from the Illuminati who got bribed by the Tower of Dusk and came here to persuade us," Divine General Zoro said with a look of disdain. Although the Illuminati was a powerful force in the endless ocean, it didn't mean that everyone in the Illuminati would suppress others using the power of the Illuminati. Grina had also thought of that point. Hence, he waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "All right, go check it out. Show the Illuminati some basic respect and send them away. Don't let things blow out of proportion." "Rest assured, Prince," Zoro said and bowed before walking away with the guard. With Zoro, a sanctuary-level divine general, Grina believed that the Illuminati would back off after knowing that it would be difficult to convince them. Thus, He started thinking about the seahorse slaves again. However, just a few minutes later, Grina suddenly felt that the entire underwater castle was trembling violently, as if there was a volcano below the castle that was about to erupt. The guard who led Zoro out stumbled over, and loudly exclaimed, "Prince, Divine General Zoro has been captured by the people from the Illuminati. They said that they will throw this castle into the sky unless we hand over those slaves." Although the strength of the four Divine Generals was in the lower tier, they were ultimately real sanctuary powerhouses. Zoro had only gone out for a few minutes, and yet he had already gotten captured. How strong must the other party be? Grina was dumbfounded. While trying to stabilize his body, he asked, "Who exactly is the person who came?" "It's Saint Edmund of the Illuminati," the guard answered stammeringly. Although Grina was a prince of the giant shark clan, he was still shocked by Saint Edmund's identity. He initially thought that the person who came should be someone from the Illuminati, who had been bribed by the Tower of Dusk, and was here to ask him to hand the seahorse slaves over as a lobbyist. In that case, it would mean that the representative of the Illuminati definitely didn't have a high status, and could not really represent them. In fact, not to mention an Illuminati member of ordinary status, even if it was someone who was of the same status as Elder Zoomer, Grina definitely would dare to completely disregard him. However, Saint Edmund was different. As one of the four greatest saints of the Illuminati, Edmund was definitely qualified to represent the Illuminati. If Grina disregarded Edmund, he would really be disrespecting the Illuminati. That made Grina feel incredibly indignant and resentful. Not only had the Gilded Kingdom shown favoritism towards the Tower of Dusk previously, now even the Illuminati was getting involved and taking the Tower of Dusk's side. What's the big deal with that tiny Tower of Dusk? They're just a nameless force no one heard of. So what if their president is at the Sanctuary Realm? So what if he can create a guru-level Mageth scroll? Must the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati go to such great lengths to suck up to them? However, before Grina could think of a countermeasure to deal with the matter, he suddenly felt the castle shaking violently again. At this point, the castle disintegrated and broke apart like a waterlogged sand sculpture. Be it the sturdy deep-sea gemstones, or precious magical metals, they all seemed to have broken down into extremely small particles by a certain force in an instant. With the collapse of the castle, everyone in the castle, including Grina, was naturally exposed to the outside immediately. That made the giant shark clan dumbfounded. Although the underwater castle wasn't the palace of the giant shark clan, it still represented their status and pride. Besides, as the prince of the giant shark clan, Grina was here as a representative of the giant shark clan. Hence, insulting him would be tantamount to insulting the giant shark clan. Now that the castle was gone, there was naturally no need for his guard to relay the message, because Grina and the others who were in the castle immediately saw Saint Edmund. The three divine generals around Grina immediately roared in unison, and pounced onto Saint Edmund. Although Saint Edmund of the Illuminati had a great reputation as a veteran sanctuary powerhouse in the Endless Ocean, he seldom fought with anyone in the past 1,000 years. In the opinion of the three divine generals of the giant shark clan, since they were all sanctuary powerhouses, their strength shouldn't be too far off from Saint Edmund's, even if they might be at a lower level than the latter. However, before the three divine generals of the giant shark clan could get close to Edmund, they saw three huge palms emerging from the void, and smacking all three of them to the ground immediately. Regardless of how they tried to struggle and release their power, they still couldn't break free from the palms. The three sanctuary powerhouses were defeated by Edmund before they even had the chance to exchange blows with him, including Zoro, who had been captured just now. The four divine generals that Grina relied on were beaten up into a pulp and rendered defenseless. No one would believe that the four of them were sanctuary powerhouses. Looking at Saint Edmund, who was opposite him, Grina's face was incredibly sullen. His castle had been destroyed, and the four divine generals were now in such a wretched state. Saint Edmund showed no mercy at all. Saint Edmund, when all's said and done, the giant shark clan and the Illuminati have been cooperating for more than 1,000 years. You've gone overboard with your actions. Although Grina was a bit timid, he was still the prince of the giant shark clan, so he had to say something to preserve his pride. However, since Saint Edmund had demolished Grina's castle, he naturally didn't intend to save him from any embarrassment. He humphed coldly and said, "Grina, I've already shown you enough respect by asking you to hand the slaves over. If someone else had come over instead, you might not have been alive now." Grina was still trying to put up a strong front, but when he felt the aura emanating from Saint Edmund, he was not only incapable of speech, he was even almost pressed onto the ground. He felt extremely depressed and perturbed as he didn't expect Edmund to have a similar stand as the Gilded Kingdom. Do they really value Flick of the Tower of Dusk so greatly? Grina simply couldn't figure out what was going on with the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati, but Saint Edmund wasn't in the mood to explain. The castle had already collapsed, and everyone including the seahorse slaves had naturally been exposed. Edmund didn't say anything else, and simply waved his hand, after which a gigantic palm emerged from the void to grab all the seahorse slaves. After glancing at Grina coldly, Edmund said in a deep voice, "Grina, you'd better not mess with President Flick for the sake of the giant shark clan, otherwise, I might not be able to save you again next time." After saying that, he took those seahorse slaves with him and left. Hearing Edmund's words, Grina was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. "So he came to destroy my castle, and snatch the slaves while putting me to shame just to save me. How can there be such a thing in this world?" However, even if Grina was feeling indignant, he couldn't think of a good way to take revenge at this point. As the prince of the giant shark clan, he naturally knew to judge the situation and choose his battles wisely. Now that the Gilded Kingdom and Illuminati were clearly trying to protect the Tower of Dusk, he would get himself in more trouble if he insisted on going against the Tower of Dusk. If he were to end up offending the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati, he wouldn't be able to answer to his father and the elders. He might even lose his position. After thinking about it, Grina had no choice but to suppress his resentment and turn to the 4 divine generals, who had walked up to him as he said, "Get to the bottom of this matter, and find out the intentions of Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati, regardless of what it takes." "Yes," the 4 divine generals answered awkwardly. On the other hand, after snatching the seahorse slaves, Edmund brought them directly to the embassy of the Tower of Dusk. Although he seemed to have gone overboard with Grina, he knew that he was indeed saving Grina and the giant shark clan. Edmund could still remember clearly how Lin Li waved his hand to destroy a god in front of the rift on the cursed island. Even though that god was somehow only at the demigod level, he was still considered a nearly invincible existence to normal sanctuary powerhouses. The 4 divine generals of the giant shark clan were all sanctuary powerhouses, but they couldn't even last a single round against Saint Edmund. The difference in their strength was worlds apart. Although Edmund was still unaware of how strong Lin Li was now, he could at least guess that Lin Li was probably unbeatable in the sanctuary realm. Hence, Edmund had no doubt that if Lin Li came to confront Grina instead, the consequences would never be as simple as destroying Grina's castle and insulting the giant shark clan. Perhaps Grina and the 4 divine generals of the giant shark clan would die here. When Edmund brought the seahorse slaves to the embassy of the Tower of Dusk, Lin Li was having a meeting with some guests from the Octopus clan. After learning about Lin Li's attainments in the field of inscription, Great Monarch Hegel and Grand Elder Hayes of the Octopus clan became even more determined to get on good terms with him, the human guru of inscription. In fact, when Lin Li was away on the cursed island, they would show up at the embassy once every 2 or 3 days to ask if Lin Li had returned yet. That was exactly the reason that Hayes and Hegel immediately paid Lin Li a visit as soon as he returned to the embassy. Of course, Harquis, the prince of the Octopus clan, had also tagged along. After all, he was the first to interact with Lin Li. Even though the encounter wasn't exactly pleasant, Harquis' face was clearly sullen. Previously, he had been procrastinating and apologizing to Lin Li, but his father and Grand Elder Hayes eventually found out anyway. As a result, he ended up being reprimanded by his father and the few other elders. Hence, he still felt like their scoldings were ringing in his ears. However, Harquis did not resent Lin Li for it, and he now even seemed ashamed, awkward, and guilty. In the past, he might have really put the blame on Lin Li, but now he was already well aware of how shockingly accomplished Lin Li was in the field of inscription. It probably wouldn't be an overstatement to say that he was in awe of Lin Li. Harquis stood in front of Lin Li and said in a sincere tone, "Master Flick, it was my fault for offending you multiple times previously. I hope you can forgive me." Lin Li had always preferred a softer approach when dealing with a conflict. Besides, Harquis hadn't gone particularly overboard, so Lin Li merely waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "Save the apology. It's just an exchange of inscription knowledge. It's no big deal." Everyone knew that competent and capable people were generally ill-tempered. Besides, the things that Lin Li had done in the Gilded Kingdom before seemed to prove that point too. Hence, the Octopus clan had come prepared to incur a huge monetary loss, and had even braced themselves for Harquis to suffer a little. For them, as long as they could get on good terms with Lin Li, a guru of inscription, it would definitely be worth it even if he had to pay a huge price. However, instead of making things difficult for them, Lin Li chose not to put the Octopus clan down to shame, and even showed them due respect, which was to their pleasure. Putting aside the minor conflict, Lin Li's conversation with the Octopus clan immediately became much more enjoyable. After all, they didn't have a strong feud with each other in the first place. At this juncture, someone came in to report that Saint Edmund of the Illuminati had returned the seahorse slaves, whom the giant shark clan had forcibly snatched away previously. Lin Li couldn't help but smile after hearing this news. Naturally, he could guess why Saint Edmund stood up for him and got the slaves back on his behalf. However, he didn't blame Edmund for it. Anyway, regardless of who had done it, he was satisfied that the seahorse slaves had returned unharmed. As for Greeno of the Giant Shark clan, he was just a nobody to Lin Li, so Lin Li wouldn't really bear a grudge over this matter. Out of courtesy, Lin Li excused himself from the few Octopus clan members and went outside to receive Saint Edmund. Watching Lin Li leave, Hegel and Grand Elder Hayes couldn't help but look at each other. They could already tell from this matter regarding Edmund how much the Illuminati valued Lin Li. For the sake of getting the seahorse slaves back for the Tower of Dusk, Saint Edmund, one of the 4 greatest saints of the Illuminati, had even intervened personally. That was enough to show the Illuminatists' firm decision to stand on Lin Li's side. At this moment, Lin Li headed outside the embassy and saw Edmund, who had brought the seahorse slaves over. Edmund was in fact a little worried. Given how much Lin Li detested being taken advantage of, Lin Li might blame him for resolving this matter in case Lin Li was trying to take this opportunity to teach Greeno a lesson. Hence, when Edmund saw Lin Li, he immediately smilingly said, "President Flick, I hope you won't mind the fact that I have taken matters into my own hand to bring those slaves back to you." Although Lin Li had never been willing to lose out, he was not a petty person. Regardless of what intentions or reasons Edmund might have for his actions, Edmund had indeed solved a problem for Lin Li. Hence, he didn't hold it against Edmund. He waved his hand to gesture for his subordinates to take the seahorse slaves away. He then walked towards Edmund with a smile and said, "Saint Edmund, I can't thank you enough for bringing these people back for me. How can I possibly blame you? Great monarch Hegel of the Octopus clan is here in the embassy. Saint Edmund, would you like to come inside and take a seat too?" Although Edmund knew that the Octopus clan had to have developed an interest in befriending Lin Li since they bought his Mount Timagath during the auction previously, he still couldn't help but be surprised to hear that Great Monarch Hegel had come to pay Lin Li a visit in person. However, Edmund knew that Hegel's visit had to be out of something more than just courtesy. Hence, he didn't want to go in to disturb him, and thus smiled before self-deprecatingly saying, "Oh, you guys must be discussing inscriptions. I'm just a layman who knows nothing about inscriptions. I shan't go in and make a fool of myself." Of course, Edmund was not entirely clueless about inscriptions. After all, he was a sanctuary powerhouse who had been living for thousands of years. Even a fool would have learned quite a bit about inscription if they were in Edmund's shoes. However, Edmund's knowledge of inscription was far inferior to that of the Octopus clan, who were born with a talent in inscription, and even more so compared to Lin Li, a guru of inscription who was nearing the divine smith level. When compared to the people of the Octopus clan or Lin Li, Edmund really wasn't being modest by calling himself a layman. Edmund wasn't really keen on inscription either. Hence, after learning that Lin Li, Hegel, and the others would definitely be discussing inscriptions, he decided not to join them, and thus bade farewell to Lin Li. After seeing Edmund off, Lin Li did not immediately return inside to continue conversing with the people of the Octopus clan, and instead went to look at the seahorse slaves who had been settled there. He knew that Greena definitely wasn't just trying to stand up for himself and vent his anger by snatching those seahorse slaves, but rather was certain that Greena had to have other reasons for doing so. However, Lin Li didn't care about those issues. Hence, after taking a look at the seahorse slaves, he said to them, "I know that you hold some secrets that Greena wants to know, but I'm not interested in those secrets. All you have to do now is focus on becoming stronger. I don't need a bunch of slaves to carry out hard labor, but I want you to become the seahorse knights that have once dominated the endless ocean. Show me a satisfactory standard of competency, and I'll grant you freedom. Your secrets will remain yours to hold." Lin Li was not trying to get into their goods books or win their favor. After all, races that had suffered a tragic fate like the Seahorse clan definitely couldn't be won over just with some sugar-coated words or flattery. Lin Li merely hoped that they could temporarily put aside those damned secrets and focus entirely on improving their individual strength for the time being. Otherwise, even if Lin Li provided them with the best resources and environment for growth, they would only end up wasting everything if they couldn't focus on training. After giving those instructions, Lin Li left the room without even waiting for the Seahorse clan members to pledge their allegiance and express their loyalty to him. Well, the guests from the Octopus clan were still in the guest hall, and he couldn't make them wait for too long. Upon returning to the guest hall, Lin Li spoke to Hegel and the others for a few more minutes, before finally getting to the main topic of their conversation. Great Monarch Hegel first invited Lin Li to visit the Octopus clan, where they could have enough time to exchange knowledge about inscriptions. When it came to the exchange of inscription knowledge, Hegel couldn't help but seem a little embarrassed because Lin Li was a guru of inscription who was nearing the divine smith level. Instead of an exchange of knowledge, it seemed more appropriate to call it an inscription lesson from Lin Li to the Octopus Clan. Although the Octopus Clan was talented in inscription, Grand Elder Hayes was the only one in the clan who had barely achieved a guru level attainment in inscription. In the entire Octopus Clan, gurus of inscription were rare and few in number. Thus, there was nothing much for them to offer to Lin Li, and by calling it an exchange of knowledge, they would seem to be holding themselves highly. However, Lin Li wasn't bothered about that. In fact, he indeed needed the Octopus Clan's help in some matters. He was planning to recruit a batch of inscribers from the Octopus Clan to work for him for free, as he had done with Wilkinson and the other pharmacists previously. Lin Li was indeed a guru of inscription who had already touched the Divine Smith level, but he ultimately couldn't make clones of himself, and thus was unable to juggle so many things and handle everything simultaneously on his own. In particular, the drawing of mage arrays would require several complicated and fundamental processes, which he was completely uninterested in. He couldn't possibly waste his time on carrying out the basic processes, either. Therefore, after accepting Hegel's invitation, Lin Li naturally raised his request too. I've long heard that Octopus Clan is inherently talented in inscription, and I know that almost everyone in the Octopus Clan has considerable attainments in inscription. It just so happens that I still need some inscribers for the Tower of Dusk. So great monarch Hegel, may I know if you can help me assemble some of them? If it had been someone else who asked for a batch of inscribers, Hegel would have turned them down immediately without any consideration. He might be even fallen out with them. After all, inscribers had high status in Anral, and any force that had an inscriber would definitely put their inscriber on a pedestal and serve them with due respect. Although the Octopus Clan members were born with a high talent in inscription, there were very few who really qualified to be called inscribers, and the absolute majority of the Octopus Clan were only good at drawing some maggets for attacking and defense, while some specialized only in the drawing of magic scrolls. Those who were truly qualified to be called inscribers would have to have done adequate research on inscription, and could skillfully draw the majority of maggets that were below the level of their strength. Hence, even for the Octopus Clan, inscribers were extremely precious. However, the person who asked for the inscribers was Lin Li, so Hegel's attitude was completely different. Lin Li was a guru of inscription who was almost at the level of the Divine Smith. Any inscriber who learned alongside Lin Li would definitely gain plenty of advanced inscription knowledge from him. If not for the fact that he was the great monarch of the Octopus Clan, Hegel would have recommended himself to Lin Li. Hegel knew that Lin Li's request would probably be an absolutely excellent opportunity for the Octopus Clan. However, he was also a little worried. After all, Lin Li had an extremely high attainment in inscription, so gathering a sufficient number of inscribers who met Lin Li's requirements was still a tricky issue for Hegel. Besides, the Octopus Clan still required a large number of inscribers to keep their businesses running, and they couldn't possibly terminate a huge portion of their magic scroll business because of this. Furthermore, inscribers were an important force of the Octopus Clan, without which the Octopus Clan would definitely face more trouble in the endless ocean. Hence, Hegel suppressed his agitation and cautiously asked Lin Li, "Masterfully, what level of inscribers do you need?" Lin Li could completely guess what was on Hegel's mind, so he smiled and said, "Great monarch Hegel, you don't have to worry. I won't make you hand over your cherished inscribers. I just need about 20-30 mid-rank or senior inscribers. Besides, I believe that as long as they are not fools, their capabilities will definitely improve by the time they return to the clan. I'll find you some senior inscribers," Hegel exclaimed, completely ignoring the option of mid-level inscribers. There were many high-level inscribers in the Octopus Clan. Sending out 20-30 senior inscribers was not an issue for the Octopus Clan at all. Perhaps the biggest problem to consider now was who to send to the Tower of Dusk. Hegel even considered sending his son, Harquis, to Lin Li along with the other inscribers, in hopes that Harquis could return with guru-level attainments in inscription. Lin Li nodded and confirmed, "Yes, they can be mid-rank or senior inscribers, or a mix of both." "All right. How about this, Masterfully? You may look at the inscribers of our clan during your visit to our place, and pick them out as you please. It won't be a problem even if you'd like to take 200 or 300 of them away with you." Hegel quickly agreed. He wouldn't mind really giving 200 or 300 inscribers to Lin Li. Lin Li calculated the time and realized that there was less than a month left until the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration. He was planning to wait until the celebration was over and return to the breezy plains. After all, there were still quite a few things that he had to handle there. Hence, after settling on a time with Hegel, he decided to visit the Octopus Clan in 2 days' time, thinking that it wouldn't take that long to pick out a few inscribers anyway. After seeing Hegel and the others off, it was still as crowded as ever at the entrance of the Tower of Dusk's embassy. Hearing that Lin Li, the guru of inscription, had returned, they quickly came forth to visit Lin Li with the gifts that they had prepared. Although not all forces eagerly needed inscribers, it would still be a good thing for them to get acquainted with a guru of inscription. The Siren clan, which really needed Lin Li's help, naturally wouldn't procrastinate at this juncture. Soon, Prince Cleve arrived at the embassy of the Tower of Dusk again. He had heard from Hegel that Lin Li would be visiting the Octopus clan in 2 days' time, and the Siren clan's turf happened to be near the Octopus clan's. Thus, they immediately came over to invite Lin Li. Lin Li happened to still need the Siren clan's Siren's Tears for concocting a potion meant for enhancing the mental strength of mages. Hence, after some detailed discussion, Lin Li also settled on a time to visit the Siren clan. Anyway, he would still be able to bring back some inscribers from the Octopus clan, so they could help him out when the time came. In the blink of an eye, 2 days passed, and it was time for Lin Li to visit the Octopus clan as agreed upon with Hegel. Great Monarch Hegel, Grand Elder Hayes, and the several other elders once again arrived at the Tower of Dusk's embassy to invite Lin Li in. However, Lin Li was not the only one who followed Hegel and the others to the Octopus clan as a guest. Elder Zoomer of the Illuminati was tagging along as well. Clearly, the Illuminati was determined to get close to Lin Li this time, and they weren't hiding their intentions at all. Lin Li didn't oppose having Elder Zoomer tag along, either. After all, he indeed needed a guide to take him on a tour around the endless ocean. After leaving the capital of the Gilded Kingdom and boarding the star that belonged to the Tower of Dusk, they began sailing quickly towards the area of the sea where the Octopus clan resided. Sailing at full speed, the star took less than 4 days to reach the territory of the Octopus clan. The star was moored at the pier of an island named Tidal Island, which was the place that was specially meant for receiving guests of the Octopus clan. There were merchants from all races and clans who ran businesses on the island, which was probably just as prosperous as Helena port of the Gilded Kingdom. After disembarking from the star, Hegel specifically instructed the Octopus clan members at the pier to guard the star carefully and serve the crew of the star well. He had seen how protective Lin Li was towards his subordinates, and knew that Lin Li wouldn't mind offending even the powerhouses of the Gilded Kingdom for the sake of his men. After making arrangements, Hegel led Lin Li and the others to a large, beautiful building in the center of Tidal Island. There was also a teleportation array in the building, which was specially used to entertain the distinguished guests of the Octopus clan, that could lead users to the underwater capital of the Octopus clan, Lanta City. 2 days before their departure, Hegel had already relayed the news back to the Octopus clan, and made various arrangements for the welcoming ceremony. Thus, when they arrived on the island, the Octopus clan members were already long prepared to welcome and receive them. The scale of the welcoming ceremony was just as large and grand as when the Gilded Kingdom welcomed Lin Li. Of course, Lin Li didn't care about such formalities at all. Seeing that it was about time, he said to Hegel, "Great Monarch Hegel, we can skip this. I'm really eager to take a tour around Lantis City." In fact, Hegel had taken inspiration from the Gilded Kingdom for this welcoming ceremony because the Sea Clan wasn't good at such things. Seeing that Lin Li wasn't a fan of the ceremony, he decided not to insist any further. Hence, he waved his hand to gesture for his subordinates to leave. He smilingly said, "Haha, Master Flick, please forgive me. Since you don't like this, we'll skip it and head straight to Lantis City." They arrived in front of the teleportation array, and Lin Li started sizing it up, only to realize that it wasn't an advanced teleportation array, and was not at all comparable to the one in the Sky Castle. The range of teleportation was probably only 50 kilometers. Thus, the Octopus clan's Lantis City was probably at the bottom of the sea near Tidal Island. After the few of them entered the teleportation array, the professionals outside activated it, and rays of mana light began to flow along the patterns on the teleportation array. By the time the lines were filled with magic, dazzling rays of light suddenly emerged from the teleportation array, shrouding all the figures within. When the light of the teleportation array dissipated, the group had already vanished. Almost at the same time, a teleportation array in the central square of the underground Lantis City began to light up with a rich light. Under the accompaniment of Hegel and others, Lin Li slowly walked out from that light. After stepping out of the teleportation array and getting a clear glimpse of the surroundings, Lin Li couldn't help but be shocked, even though he had seen a lot of this world. Although the Octopus clan resided at sea, they weren't really submerged in water all the time. Only the weaker sea clans would live underwater, just like residents from the countryside on the mainland. However, there was a high level of humidity in the city because the Sea Clan had to live in an aqueous environment. After all, there was a transparent canopy dozens of meters above the underwater Lantis City, which separated the city from the water. Looking up from below, one would be able to see fish swimming past, which was similar to the feeling of looking at birds in the sky from the ground. The buildings in Lantis City ranged from 1 to 3 stories high. However, they were extremely colorful and shaped like enlarged conches. There was even a variety of patterns on them, which made Lin Li feel as if he had entered a fairy tale world. Instead of trees, clusters of brightly colored coral were used to decorate the city. In the eyes of the Sea Clan, corals were not very valuable, but they would probably fetch sky-high prices on the mainland. Lanta's city was not full of a gilded splendor, but it made Lin Li feel dreamy. Of course, it was his first time seeing an underwater city. The only ones he had ever been to in his previous life were those underwater aquariums, and thus he was extremely shocked by Lanta's city. Elder Zoomer stayed by Lin Li's side and began introducing the place to him like a tour guide. He said, among the various sea cities, Lanta's city of the Octopus Clan can be considered one of the largest ones. It's in fact a notch bigger than the Gilded Kingdom's capital, Hupra City. Lanta's city of the Octopus Clan looked exceptionally gorgeous and resplendent under the light reflected through the seawater, reminding Lin Li of the Dragon King Ocean Palace, which was a legend from the world he had transmigrated from. Among the 7 overlords of the Endless Ocean, the Octopus Clan might not be the strongest, but the amount of wealth that they had amassed over countless years was far more than what the other sea clans could compare to. That was obvious from Lanta's city. It could be said that each type of building material boasted an extremely shocking value. In addition to the precious materials, there were also various mageths that were used to decorate the city, since the Octopus Clan were experts in the field of inscription. Given Lin Li's judgment, it would be extremely easy to tell what those mageths were. Even the hidden mageths couldn't escape his eyes. Lin Li did not know what the other areas of Lanta's city were like, but at the very least, every inch of space that he was in now was covered with mageths. However, the mageths and mageth arrays here were mostly master-level mageths. The mageths here had a variety of power and functions, some of which were for attack and some for defense. There were also some that worked like traps. Each and every single mageth was definitely extremely sought after in the outside world, and could be recorded in the history of inscriptions as an excellent work. However, with Lin Li's current judgment, these impressive master-level or even guru-level mageths could barely arouse much interest. The only thing that could catch Lin Li's eye was a guru-level mageth array that was similar to the conquering mageth of the Sky Castle. It was said that during the Octopus Clan's prime, there were more than 20 gurus of inscription in the clan, and they were the ones who created this guru-level mageth array. The guru-level mageth array was called the Kingdom of the Gods, and like the conquering mageth, it had the power to significantly increase the strength of one's team within a certain range. Although it seemed to be mightier than the conquering mageth, its actual effects might only be 1/10 of the conquering mageth. Of course, even so, the Kingdom of the Gods mageth array was definitely considered a top mageth array. Only the Octopus Clan could have 20 gurus of inscription jointly creating a Kingdom of the Gods mageth array. Other forces didn't dare to think about it at all. The mageths alone were more than enough to ensure that Lanta's city would never fall. Although their power and functions might not be comparable to those of the Sky Castle, this city could definitely be called a sacred land. Lanta's city was a crucial reason as to why the Octopus Clan could remain one of the top 3 sea clans and dominate the Endless Ocean for countless years. Under the personal lead of great monarch Hegel, Lin Li slowly made his way towards a 5-colored conch-like building while listening to Elder Zoomer's introduction of Lanta's city. This conch-shaped building could be said to be the center of political affairs of Lanta's city, where great monarch Hegel and the elders usually held conferences to decide on the various matters of the Octopus Clan. It was clearly used as the place to receive Lin Li this time. At this moment, there were already a lot of people from the Octopus Clan waiting in line in front of the main entrance of the building. Besides, it could be seen from their attire that they should be powerful figures of high status in the Octopus Clan. Seeing this scene, even Elder Zoomer was startled. Regardless of what the welcoming ceremony was like just now, it was only superficial. The personal greeting and welcoming by the significant bigwigs of the Octopus Clan was a true reflection of the importance that the Octopus Clan attached to Lin Li. Elder Zoomer knew that Lin Li had extremely high attainments in inscription, but he didn't expect that he would warrant such a grand welcome from the Octopus Clan. After all, he didn't know how high Lin Li's attainment in inscription was exactly, but everyone knew that the Octopus Clan had a high status in the field of inscription. Hegel led Lin Li to the front of the crowd and began to introduce him to his clansmen. In the past, Elder Zoomer had once visited Lanta's city together with Saint Edmund, during which occasion the Sea Clans had sent people to greet and welcome them. However, Elder Zoomer still remembered very clearly that the people who had come out to receive them had been snobbish and arrogant. However, Elder Zoomer noticed that the ones whom great monarch Hegel sent to greet and receive Lin Li were full of earnestness and fear towards Lin Li, and their tone of voice was also very respectful, a complete opposite of what he remembered. Master Philic, this is Joshner, a master of inscription who is responsible for creating mageths for the Octopus clan. He is also very knowledgeable about magic scrolls, Hegel introduced as he led Lin Li to an Octopus clan elder. After hearing the introduction, Lin Li nodded with a smile on his face, and said, "Hello." Master Joshner was introduced simply as the person in charge of magic scrolls. What a plain introduction. However, Zoomer knew that Master Joshner could be said to be the directing producer of the mageths of the Octopus clan, whose inscription attainments were absolutely considered to be the top in the clan. The works of Joshner would definitely fetch record-breaking prices even during auctions. Elder Zoomer still remembered that the last time he visited this place with Saint Edmund, Master Joshner did not even show up. In fact, when Saint Edmund requested to meet Master Joshner, the latter simply declined, citing the reason of being unavailable. Another person came up next, and Hegel similarly smilingly introduced him to Lin Li. "Master Felik, this is my teacher, Guru of Inscription Harkro. He has produced many mageths that are used in Lantis City, and has also participated in the drawing of the Kingdom of the Gods Mageth array." "Oh, hello, Master Harkro," Lin Li greeted. There still wasn't much of a change in his expression, as if there wasn't much of a difference between Harkro and the previous inscribers. On the other hand, Elder Zoomer froze in shock after hearing Hegel's introduction. Lin Li might not know who Harkro was, but Elder Zoomer was well aware that this name was a legend in the Endless Ocean. In terms of seniority, Grand Elder Hayes of the Octopus clan was just like an elementary school student in front of Harkro. During the Ocean Dynasty's rule, Harkro was the chief inscriber until the Ocean Dynasty was overthrown, after which Harkro led the Octopus clan through countless ordeals in the Great Ocean War, which allowed them to earn their position as one of the 7 overlords. The most powerful Mageth array of Lantis City, the Kingdom of the Gods Mageth array, was created by 20-odd gurus of inscription of the Octopus clan under the lead of Harkro. The completion of the Kingdom of the Gods Mageth array allowed Lantis City to become a truly unconquerable city. Given Harkro's identity and status, even the Lord of the Illuminati might not get a chance to meet him. Over the past few thousands of years, there hadn't been any news of Harkro, and people even thought that the famous guru of inscription had passed away. Elder Zoomer had never thought that he would have the chance to meet this legend of the Octopus clan thanks to Lin Li. Hegel's introduction of each greeter made Elder Zoomer incredibly astonished. When he came to visit with Edmund previously, the Octopus clan had only sent some senior members and a few junior inscribers to greet them. However, through Hegel's introduction, Elder Zoomer heard the names of legendary figures who were extremely famous in the entire Anral. In fact, among these people, there were many whom he hadn't heard of in years, and who the people in the outside world thought had already passed, and would remain legends. Even a powerhouse like Saint Edmund couldn't put on airs in front of these mighty figures of the field of inscription. Meanwhile, Elder Zoomer somehow felt a sense of inferiority. However, Lin Li did not express much, and merely greeted them with an indifferent nod. However, the mighty figures of the field of inscription of the Octopus clan did not show the slightest trace of dissatisfaction. Even though they seemed to have some suspicion in their eyes, no one dared to stand out and say something inappropriate in such an untimely manner. After the introductions, Hegel led Lin Li and the inscribers of the Octopus clan to the 5-colored conch-like building. On the other hand, Elder Zoomer was already a little groggy and dazed at this moment. He didn't know what he was doing, and was merely following Lin Li subconsciously. Hegel invited Lin Li to Lantis City mainly for the sake of getting some guidance from Lin Li. On the other hand, Lin Li didn't want to waste too much time there, so he soon cut straight to the chase after a polite exchange of pleasantries. The inscribers of the Octopus clan had already heard about Lin Li from Hegel, although many of them might not believe that Lin Li, a human inscriber, really had such high attainments in inscription. They had all prepared a long list of questions to ask him a long time ago. The vast majority of the inscribers of the Octopus clan had reached a bottleneck in their inscription research for various reasons. Hence, they had lots of inscription-related questions. For example, the guru of inscription Harkro had already been a guru of inscription for thousands of years, but he still hadn't improved much in inscription. If Harkro could break through his bottleneck, his attainments in inscription would probably reach the peak of the guru level very soon. In fact, he might even be able to get a glimpse of the mysteries of the divine smith level. However, Lin Li did not come to give a lecture on inscription. If he were to answer every single question of the numerous inscribers of the Octopus clan, it would probably take him at least 3 to 5 months to do so. Hence, while the inscribers were about to ask Lin Li for some guidance on Hegel's signal, Lin Li extended his hand to stop them unceremoniously. Seeing Lin Li's actions, Elder Zoomer, who had just recovered from his senses, once again slipped into a state of confusion. President Fulik is really bold. He actually didn't do those mighty figures of inscription a favor. Immediately afterwards, Lin Li turned around to look at the white wall behind him, which was probably used for hanging things like maps and diagrams during council meetings. While everyone watched in bewilderment, he stood up and walked towards the wall, where he pulled out a crystal pen and began writing on the wall. Lin Li was very quick in drawing the Magath, and by the time the crowd below recovered from the shock, he was already putting away the pen and walking towards Great Monarch Hegel. He said, "All right, if they have any issues, they can find the answers to their questions on the wall. Let's talk about the matter of inscribers going to the Tower of Dusk." What? Great Monarch Hegel was stunned, but immediately afterwards, he realized what Lin Li was talking about. Does he not want to teach our inscribers inscriptions? The first thing that came to Hegel's mind was that Lin Li didn't want to give the inscribers of the Octopus clan any guidance. Otherwise, he couldn't have asked to go straight to the topic of the inscribers going to the Tower of Dusk without answering a single question. However, immediately afterwards, Hegel recalled the things that Lin Li said previously, and immediately looked at the wall in front of him that was covered in complex Magaths that he had never seen before. Although they hadn't been activated yet, it was obvious that they were guru-level Magaths. Hegel initially thought of taking a look to find out what was going on before responding to Lin Li, but he didn't expect to have his eyes glued to it as soon as he did so, as he couldn't bear to even blink at all. The master inscribers of the Octopus clan were all widening their eyes like Hegel, and staring straight at the Magaths that Lin Li had left on the wall, which made everyone fall silent. Elder Zoomer didn't know much about inscriptions, but he was confused by the reactions of the Octopus clan members. He only knew that the exchange of inscriptions seemed to have ended before it had even begun. He hurriedly got up, chased after Lin Li, and asked with some concern, "President Fulik, is this appropriate?" Elder Zoomer was afraid that Lin Li would offend the Octopus clan, even though Saint Edmund had already instructed Elder Zoomer that the Illuminati had to express their firm stand on taking Lin Li's side, regardless of what Lin Li encountered. The Octopus clan was not the giant shark clan, after all. The Illuminati had a deeper cooperative relationship with the Octopus clan, and if Lin Li were to fall out with the Octopus clan, the Illuminati would definitely incur major losses as well. Hearing Elder Zoomer's question and seeing how worried he was, Lin Li smiled calmly, waved his hand, and said, "Elder Zoomer, don't worry, I've given them the answers they need, and they can go there to look for them themselves." What's so inappropriate about that? Despite what Lin Li said, Elder Zoomer was still as worried as before, and he could only stare at the hall nervously to watch the Octopus clan's reaction. However, what he was worried about did not happen. Not only did none of the people of the Octopus clan stand out and accuse Lin Li, they even kept their eyes fixed on the Magaths on the wall, seemingly mesmerized and in awe. It was as if everything around them could not affect them at all. However, Lin Li didn't have the patience to wait for Hegel to come back to his senses. Hence, he raised his voice slightly, and even used the vibration of his mental strength to say to Hegel, "Great Monarch Hegel, the Magath is right there, and you can study it whenever you please. Should we get my matters settled first?" If he'd simply raised his voice and exclaimed loudly, he might not have been able to back Hegel snap out of his trance. Fortunately, he had used the shaking of his mental strength to draw Hegel out of his state of engrossment. After coming back to reality, Hegel looked at Lin Li excitedly and said, "Master Fulik, thank you so much. You've given the Octopus clan a treasure of inscription classics that can be passed down through the ages." There was no way Hegel wouldn't get all worked up and excited. Given his attainment in inscriptions, he could tell how precious the unknown Magath was even though he had only been studying the Magath for a few moments. Although he didn't know the exact name of the Magath and the kind of power it contained, he could tell that the Magath contained almost all the theories of inscription of various profoundness. It could be said that as long as this Magath was in place, even an apprentice of inscription would be able to advance all the way to the guru level of inscription, following the guidance of the Magath. At the level that Hegel was currently at, he couldn't yet deduce if the Magath could lead an inscriber to the Divine Smith level, but he was certain that as long as one took the correct path, reaching the Divine Smith realm would certainly not be as difficult as before now that they had the help of the Magath. Faced with an excited Hegel, Lin Li didn't say much, and instead asked the same question as before. "Great Monarch, now that your problem has been resolved, should we talk about mine?" Yes, I am getting way too excited. Don't worry, President Fulik, please give me 3 days grace, and I'll definitely get you all the inscribers with the best talent. Hegel was now completely at ease and full of trust in Lin Li. Based on the Magath that Lin Li had drawn on the wall alone, he was already certain that his inscribers would definitely obtain major gains in the field of inscription if they continued to learn alongside Hegel. In fact, according to Lin Li's requirements, Hegel didn't have to get any extremely talented inscribers at all. As long as the candidates were senior inscribers who weren't dense, they would be able to meet Lin Li's criteria, and Hegel would be able to fulfill the task that Lin Li had given him. However, great monarch Hegel couldn't be that slipshod with the selection. After all, in their opinion, learning from a guru of inscription like Lin Li would be the best opportunity. If it weren't for the fact that he was the great monarch of the Octopus clan, Hegel would have followed Lin Li to the Tower of Dusk. Of course, even if he could not go himself, he was already determined deep down that he had to send his son, Harquis, to the Tower of Dusk. In fact, a team of inscribers who fitted Lin Li's requirements could be gathered easily within 3 minutes, not to mention 3 days. However, the Octopus clan was having some trouble with those matters. On the one hand, Hegel had to consider the talent of the candidates. After all, those who lacked talent would only be wasting the godsend opportunity if they went to the Tower of Dusk. On the other hand, he also had to consider the distribution of benefits and interests. For example, if Hegel tried to send his son to the Tower of Dusk, others would definitely be aware of the benefits it involved. Everyone in the clan had their own descendants and juniors who they hoped could achieve great accomplishments in life. However, there was a maximum quota of about 30 candidates, so there would inevitably be some competition for the slots. Hegel had to consider this matter comprehensively lest he let this wonderful opportunity drive a wedge between the members of the clan. Alright, I'll give you 2 days. I can stay here and delay my plan by at most 2 days. Great monarch Hegel, I hope that you can pick out the candidates by then, said Lin Li, who knew that great monarch Hegel definitely had plenty to consider. That was why he didn't urge him much. Seeing that Lin Li wasn't displeased, Hegel nodded profusely and said, alright, 2 days is fine. Everyone in the hall was already immersed in studying the Maggeth, so Lin Li naturally did not want to continue staying there and facing the dozens of statues. Hence, after hearing that Hegel had agreed, he then said, alright, since there's nothing more for me to do here, you guys go ahead while I take a tour around the city. Alright, how about I let Harquis accompany you? Hegel immediately called his son over and instructed him to accompany Lin Li on a tour around the city to entertain Lin Li, the most important guest of the Octopus clan, on his behalf. Although he was also fascinated by the Maggeths on the walls, Harquis didn't dare to disobey his father's instructions, and thus quickly led Lin Li out away from the hall enthusiastically. Fortunately, Harquis no longer bore a grudge or harbored ill feelings against Lin Li after the apology, so he seemed more relaxed around him too. With Harquis' accompaniment, Lin Li managed to take a tour around Lantis City in 2 days' time, and even collected some items that were not commonly found. Harquis did a rather good job at hosting Lin Li and treating him with the best hospitality. Besides, after the contact in the past 2 days, he felt that Lin Li didn't seem to be as loathsome as Cantori had made him out to be. Hence, he couldn't help but have some doubts about Cantori. Of course, Hegel was not just going to dump Lin Li to Harquis and forget all about him. He had also thrown a banquet of a considerable size during the visit, only to find that Lin Li wasn't interested in a banquet at all. In the past 2 days, the numerous senior members of the Octopus clan had been vying intensely for a chance to learn from Lin Li. In fact, the sounds of their arguments could be heard in the hall of the 5-colored conch-shaped building almost every single moment. Hegel was completely overwrought while trying to resolve those issues. After all, the quotas were really too precious in their opinion. 2 days later, Hegel finally decided on the final list of candidates. Although Lin Li said he wanted 20-30 of them, Hegel maximized the quotas and selected 30 senior inscribers for Lin Li. Of course, the inscribers were not all sons of nobles and powerful figures. Many of them were also famous geniuses of the Octopus clan. Although Hegel had gone through a tedious selection process, Lin Li did not even bother to carefully consider their individual aptitude after seeing the selected candidates. Anyway, he just needed 20-30 inscribers who could assist him, and their talent didn't matter to him at all. Masterfully, please take a look at these youngsters. They do fit your requirements, don't they? Hegel asked Lin Li carefully after seeing them. Lin Li merely glanced at them simply before nodding as he said, alright, these ones will do. Seeing that Lin Li nodded and agreed so readily, Hegel also felt a bit more at ease. Immediately afterwards, he said with some difficulty, Masterfully, these inscribers are among the best elites of the younger generation in my clan, and so they are inevitably a little arrogant. In order to let them better obey your instructions, I plan to send my son, Harquis, to keep an eye on them. What do you think? Hegel originally intended to let his son Harquis take up a slot among the quota of 30 candidates, but there was already fierce competition for those 30 slots, which gave him a huge headache. Hence, he thought of this solution where Harquis could follow alongside Lin Li and learn from him, without having to take up a slot in the quota. Lin Li naturally saw through Hegel's intentions at a glance, but he wasn't bothered. because it was just one extra candidate. Now that he had taken a tour around Lanta City and gotten a team of inscribers, Lin Li didn't want to waste any more time here. Thus, he immediately said goodbye to Hegel. Hegel tried to make Lin Li stay a little longer, but when he realized that he couldn't change Lin Li's mind, he had no choice but to regretfully say, "Masterfully, since you have some matters to handle, I'll leave these young men to you. If any of them, including Harquis, are to disobey you, feel free to banish them. I hope that you will have time to visit us again in the future. We will always regard you as the most important friend of the Octopus clan." Finally, under the escort of Hegel and the senior members of the Octopus clan, Lin Li, Harquis, and the other inscribers boarded the Star, which then slowly set sail from the port of Tidal Island to the Siren Clan sea area. As soon as they arrived in the Siren Clan's territorial sea waters, there was already a special team sent by the Siren Clan, who had heard of the news long ago, to welcome Lin Li and the others. There were numerous senior members of the Siren Clan riding 16 white whales with huge bodies, who were led by Prince Cleve, to welcome them halfway. While riding on the back of a single-horned white whale, Prince Cleve arrived on the deck of the Star, where he saw Lin Li, Harquis, and the other inscribers of the Octopus clan. Prince Cleve couldn't help but be surprised when he saw Harquis and the others on the Star, because he didn't expect that the Octopus clan would actually value Lin Li so greatly as to send Harquis to stay by Lin Li's side. Harquis was the prince of the Octopus clan, who was going to succeed Hegel as the great monarch of the Octopus clan in the future. His importance to the Octopus clan was far greater than that of the ordinary clansmen. Initially, Prince Cleve had invited Lin Li over to help them draw a Magath that would be complementary to the heart of all evil, because he thought that Lin Li's attainment in inscription should be on par with that of the inscribers of the Octopus clan. After all, those truly powerful inscribers of the Octopus clan could not be hired easily. Meanwhile, Lin Li had already proven his guru-level attainments in inscription with the creation of the Mount Tai Magath. However, Prince Cleve did not expect that Lin Li's inscription attainment would be enough to earn him the respect of the Octopus clan, who had even bowed down to him. Only after hearing Elder Zoomer's hint, and the explanations from Harquis and the other inscribers, did he realize how wise of a decision he had made. The Siren clan's underwater capital was called Starry Crescent City, which, although it wasn't as large and powerful as the Octopus clan's Lantis City, was definitely unparalleled in the Endless Ocean in terms of the city itself and the surrounding sea environment. Prince Cleve led Lin Li all the way to Starry Crescent City under the sea. During the journey, Lin Li saw the breathtakingly beautiful scenery that showed him just why the Siren clan would be called the Elves of the Ocean. Not to mention the scenery under the sea, even the islands on the surface of the sea exuded the beauty of nature, which was probably on par with, if not better than, the High Elves' Emerald Forest. The Siren clan greeted and welcomed Lin Li enthusiastically at Starry Crescent City. Compared to the peculiar appearance of the Octopus clan members, the gorgeous female sirens were like a feast for the eyes. Queen Hylia of the Siren clan had personally attended the welcoming banquet for Lin Li, and even expressed the friendly intentions of the Siren clan towards Lin Li. Although Lin Li was quite indifferent to this, Elder Zoomer, who tagged along, was once again surprised by the enthusiasm of the Siren clan. Elder Zoomer couldn't help but remember how he had been brainstorming to devise a scheme against Lin Li back in the breezy plains in the beginning. However, Lin Li had now not only given the Illuminati great help, he was also valued greatly by the Octopus clan and the Siren clan. Lin Li didn't waste much time with the Siren clan. After attending the welcome banquet of the Siren clan, he went straight to the point by mentioning the deal between the two parties. The Siren clan naturally couldn't wait to use the heart of all evil, and thus they didn't exchange a lot of pleasantries with Lin Li, and simply took out the Magath of the heart of all evil. However, in the face of the Magath blueprint that the Siren clan had gone through painstaking means to obtain, Lin Li simply gave Prince Cleve a list of materials required for the Magath without looking at the blueprint at all. After asking Prince Cleve to prepare the materials, he gathered all the inscribers such as Harquis, and began assigning tasks to them. Harquis and the others did not expect that they would have the opportunity to learn about drawing Magaths from Lin Li. They weren't fools, and had been repeatedly instructed by their elders not to behave disrespectfully even though they were usually arrogant and snobbish, so they knew how they should act now. Furthermore, no one dared to disobey Lin Li under the watchful eye of the prince, Harquis. Hence, after hearing Lin Li's instructions, the young inscription geniuses immediately became as attentive as elementary school students. In fact, they could barely conceal their excitement, which was written all over their faces. Of course, Lin Li didn't just assign them to laborious tasks. While assigning the tasks, he naturally explained to them some problems that they faced in inscription and cleared their doubts lest they ended up messing up. After half a day, Prince Cleve had prepared all the materials required for the Magath. While Harquis and the other inscribers had also begun carrying out their respective tasks in the Siren clan's palace according to Lin Li's instructions, Prince Cleve was a little worried to see the situation. Even though the Octopus clan's foundation was an inscription, these young clansmen were ultimately only intermediate level and advanced level inscribers. The Siren clan had invited Lin Li to come over and help them because he was a guru of inscription. However, if the Octopus clan's inscribers were doing all the work, it wouldn't make a difference even if they didn't invite Lin Li here. Although Prince Cleve couldn't bring himself to ask about it straightforwardly, he couldn't help but tactfully ask Lin Li, President Flick, can they handle the task? Lin Li didn't blame Prince Cleve for being doubtful, and instead confidently said, Your Highness, please don't worry, they are just doing some basic work. After all, it would be too time-consuming for me to work alone on the Magath that I've envisioned. With their level of competency and inscription, they are fully capable of carrying out these processes without errors. Otherwise, they wouldn't be worthy of being members of the Octopus clan. While Harquis and the others were doing the basic drawing of the Magath, Lin Li went on a tour in Starry Crescent City in Prince Cleve's company. Starry Crescent City was known to be the icon of art among the sea clans. Of course, during the tour, he had to talk to Prince Cleve about the previous deal that they had agreed on, which was regarding the purchase of the Siren's Tears. In order to make Lin Li put in more effort into the Magath, the Sea Clan had not only promised to provide him with the Siren's Tears, they had also offered the treasure of the Siren's Tears, the Queen's Tears, which was a collection of teardrops left behind by the successive generations of Siren Queens. However, the number of Queen's Tears left was rather limited because they had accumulated no more than 100 drops of Queen's Tears over the tens of thousands of years that the Siren clan had existed for. Of course, compared to the relatively ordinary Siren's Tears, the effects of using the Queen's Tears during the preparation of a potion were absolutely beyond imagination. The potions used for enhancing mental strength were extremely incredible in the first place. After being augmented with the Queen's Tears, such potions would enable a legendary powerhouse to have sanctuary-level mental strength, which could probably be considered a godly means. With the efforts of more than 30 Octopus clan inscribers, it only took 3 days for the foundation of the Magath to be completed. Lin Li then began adding some finishing touches to the Magath. Although he seemed to be just carrying out a simple process of connecting the various Magaths together with a crystal pen, the mana fluctuations that emanated from the Magaths as each one was connected made more and more people feel frightened, as if there was a terrifying beast hidden in the palace. After Lin Li finished drawing the last stroke, the entire Magath suddenly flickered with light, and the magical fluctuations suddenly turned into another extreme as it was now full of a holy aura. The holy aura kept spreading around and engulfing Starry Crescent City, rejuvenating everyone in the city. The Siren clan had spent hundreds of millions of gold coins to obtain the Heart of All Evil, and the Magath blueprint that could exert the power of the Heart of All Evil was naturally not an ordinary item. However, when Lin Li started drawing the Magath, he completely ignored the Magath's blueprint, which made Cleve feel rather anxious. However, since he was the one who invited Lin Li, and didn't have much knowledge in inscription himself, Prince Cleve had no choice but to suppress his worries while hoping that Lin Li wouldn't disappoint him. The moment the unprecedented holy aura emerged from the center of the palace, the worry in Prince Cleve's heart finally dissipated. Although he did not know anything about inscription, he could still feel from the aura that this Magath was several times stronger than the Magath he'd drawn. The Heart of All Evil was formed by an accumulation of filth over countless years, but it possessed the ability to suppress all the evil filth in the world. That was also the reason that the Siren clan didn't mind paying such a huge price to outbid the competitors for the Heart of All Evil. At this moment, the power of the Heart of All Evil was almost completely triggered by the Magath, and had even formed a holy domain world in Starry Crescent City. Everyone felt an unprecedented fullness in their mental strength in this domain world, while the power of their body was fully replenished, as if their souls and physical bodies had been fully baptized by the sacred power. After sensing the power, everyone in Starry Crescent City got into a huge uproar. The majority of the Siren clansmen and other clans were still unaware of what happened here, but Queen Halia and the other upper echelons of the Siren clan knew very clearly that the complementary Magath of the Heart of All Evil had been completed. Soon, under the lead of Queen Hallelujah, the numerous higher-ups of the Siren clan arrived in the center of the palace, where the Heart of All Evil was placed. However, when they arrived, they were greeted with a strange sight. Apart from Lin Li, who was standing next to the Heart of All Evil rather relaxedly, the young inscribers of the Octopus clan seemed to have been frozen in place by a spell as they were staring at the glistening Magath with deadpan expressions. For the young inscribers of the Octopus clan, Lin Li's method of drawing Magaths was completely beyond their comprehension and inscription knowledge. They totally didn't expect that the most basic level Magaths they had drawn in the past 2 days would actually be connected to form a Mageth array that they had never seen with a few strokes of Lin Li's pen. In fact, Lin Li had used this drawing method a long time ago in the Tower of Dusk too. At that time, the Tower of Dusk had just been built, and the Supreme Council had sent their senior inscriber, Moke, to help draw some Mageths for the Tower of Dusk. However, Lin Li had not chosen to have any advanced level Mageths drawn in the tower, and instead had just asked Moke to draw 10 rather low-level Doom Mageths. When Moke had been done, Lin Li had connected the 10 Doom Mageths that Moke had drawn into an all-kill array, which had given the condescending and proud Moke a great shock. The young inscribers of the Octopus clan were now just as frightened by the finishing touches that Lin Li had added to the Mageth with his pen. It wasn't that they hadn't seen a Mageth array before, but rather that such a method of drawing had never crossed their minds. Besides, they couldn't believe that the foundation of such a powerful Mageth array was created by them. After a long time, the inscribers finally recovered from their shock, and their eyes were now full of desire and admiration as they gazed at Lin Li. They were considered the geniuses of the Octopus clan, and were usually extremely arrogant and conceited. The only reason they didn't dare to display their haughtiness in the past few days was partly because of the instructions given by the elders in the clan, and also partly because the prince, Harquis, was keeping an eye on them. However, after watching the large and complex Mageth array in front of them that had been completed in a way that they had never seen before, the young inscribers really no longer had any doubts about Lin Li. In fact, they even began to perceive Lin Li as someone who was as great and noble as a god. At this moment, Queen Halia and her husband, Prince Cleve, already quickly strode towards Lin Li along with the higher-ups of the Siren clan. Trying their best to suppress their excitement, they asked Lin Li about the state of the Mageth. Although they could already feel the enormous power emanating from this Mageth, they still wanted to hear a confirmation straight from the horse's mouth. Master Flick, this Mageth is now complete, right? Prince Cleve asked on behalf of his wife, as well as the senior members of the Siren clan, the question that everyone was most concerned about. Seeing that the members of the Siren clan had their eyes glued to him, Lin Li felt a little amused. He nodded and said, "Yes, it has been completed, but it's not the Sacred Heart Mageth that's pictured on your blueprint, but a Mageth that I've come up with on the fly. It should be able to better exert and optimize the power of the heart of all evil. I believe you guys have felt it." After hearing Lin Li's words, the members of the Siren clan nodded. Even a fool would be able to feel the power that Starry Crescent City was now shrouded in. The power was completely beyond their expectations, and they didn't dare to think about it at all. Of course, this also made the people of the Siren clan even more determined to form a good relationship with Lin Li. After all, no one dared to say that the Siren clan would no longer need the help of inscribers in the future. Being able to befriend an inscriber like Lin Li would definitely be of great benefit to the Siren clan. The Siren clan was initially prepared to host Lin Li and the others with their utmost sincerity, but for Lin Li, the purpose of his trip here was nothing more than to fulfill his end of the deal with the Siren clan. Hence, he wouldn't waste any more time here after the deal was completed. Thus, after teaching Queen Halia some methods to control and maintain the Mageth, Lin Li bade farewell to them. After thanking the Siren clan for their hospitality, Lin Li took the young inscribers of the Octopus clan on board the Star, and headed for Four Seasons Island in the Gilded Kingdom. The massive vessel, the Star, sailed through the sea at the speed of lightning, leaving behind a long water line that seemed to have really severed the sea into two. When the Star sailed into Helena Port on Four Seasons Island, the festive atmosphere of Helena Port, or rather the entire island, reached its peak like a volcano that was about to erupt. The change in atmosphere was due to the impending highlight of the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration. Lin Li's real purpose in coming to the Gilded Kingdom was not to participate in the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration, but to take the opportunity to handle some matters here, such as tracking down the Immortal King's traces, buying some items that could not be found easily on the mainland, and making some deals with the Octopus clan. Strictly speaking, the value of the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration was even lower than that of the magic materials that Lin Li could get from the sea market. However, considering the relationship with the Gilded Kingdom, Lin Li decided to do them the honor of attending the celebration, even though they had had some unpleasant encounters with each other. After all, the Gilded Kingdom had handled the conflict in a manner that was considered satisfactory to Lin Li. Moreover, Lin Li also planned to buy a batch of magical crystal cannons from the Gilded Kingdom and equip the Sky Castle and the Star with them. Fortunately, the day of the celebration was just round the corner, and even if Lin Li wasn't willing to waste any more time here, he still had a few days to spare. Hence, after making arrangements for the Star, he brought the crowd back to the Tower of Dusk's embassy to wait for the day of the celebration to arrive. In the blink of an eye, a few days passed. On this day, Lin Li was still giving pointers to the inscribers of the Octopus clan, when a mage, who was one of his subordinates, came in from outside to report to him that the Foreign Affairs Minister of the Gilded Kingdom, Jefferson, arrived. After explaining the questions to the inscribers of the Octopus clan, Lin Li finally said, "All right, go reflect on these questions on your own. That's all for today." Harquis and the others hurriedly stood up like elementary school kids getting off class to see their teacher. Lin Li, off. When Lin Li walked out of the room, they sat down again and began to discuss the questions that they had talked about just now. After Lin Li drew the Manga array for the Siren clan, they were already convinced of Lin Li's attainments in inscription, so no one dared to belittle him at all. After Lin Li officially began to explain and answer their questions about inscription, they genuinely regarded Lin Li as their most respected teacher, from the bottom of their hearts. Of course, Lin Li didn't like to be a teacher, but he had to teach these young inscribers of the Octopus clan because he needed their help to ensure the smooth procession of the processes later. That was also the reason that he merely requested intermediate and advanced level inscribers from the Octopus clan. Although these inscribers were of a lower rank than masters of inscription, they were much more flexible and versatile than the masters of inscription who already had fixed mindsets. Thus, it would be easier to train them into the talents he needed. When Lin Li arrived at the guest hall of the embassy, the Foreign Affairs Minister of the Gilded Kingdom, Jefferson, was already waiting there. As soon as he saw Lin Li, Jefferson hurriedly stood up and respectfully said, "President Fulik, the kingdom's founding celebration is just around the corner. I've been instructed by His Majesty to come invite you to join us for the celebration in 2 days' time." At least on the surface, the Gilded Kingdom was rather cordial towards Lin Li, as both the war-supporting and peace-supporting ministers had reached a consensus not to offend Lin Li, who wasn't willing to suffer any losses. Not to mention the Illuminati's support for Lin Li, the fact that Lin Li was a guru of inscription was enough to make them bow down even though they were extremely arrogant. "Please tell His Majesty, King Bradler, that I will be attending the celebration when the time comes." Since they had a good attitude, Lin Li naturally wouldn't refuse. Hence, he agreed very quickly. Seeing that Lin Li had agreed, Jefferson couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief, and the expression on his face was suddenly less tense than before. In fact, he knew very well that the founding celebration was of extraordinary significance to the Gilded Kingdom. If it was a force that was on good terms with the Gilded Kingdom, participating in the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration would be a great opportunity to strengthen their friendly ties. However, based on Lin Li's performance since he'd arrived in the Gilded Kingdom, Jefferson really didn't think that Lin Li would take this matter as an opportunity or whatsoever. Hence, before coming to the Tower of Dusk's embassy, Jefferson was still rather worried and afraid that the ill-tempered Lin Li would really turn them down. After settling on a time with Lin Li, Jefferson stood up to leave and got ready to return and report to Bradler. However, when Jefferson was getting ready to leave, Lin Li suddenly called out to Jefferson and said, "By the way, please wait a moment. There's something else we need to talk about." Hearing Lin Li's words, Jefferson's heart skipped a beat, and he thought that some problem had cropped up. He quickly turned around and anxiously said, "President Fulik, please feel free to let us know if you're displeased with our hospitality, or if someone has come to harass you again." Having learned his lesson from the previous 2 conflicts where Lin Li put the Gilded Kingdom to shame, Jefferson didn't dare to be negligent when facing Lin Li, for he feared that he would cause more trouble for the Gilded Kingdom if he was a little slow in responding to Lin Li. Amused by how tensed up Jefferson was, Lin Li waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, Lord Jefferson, I just thought that since we'll be getting ready to go home after attending the founding celebration, it's about time to fulfill my order for the magical crystal cannons. So that's what he wants." Jefferson couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, and he quickly said, "President Fulik, please don't worry. Considering the difficulty in transporting the magical crystal cannons, we're planning to deploy some large cargo ships to help you transport them back to the breezy plains after the purchase is completed." The reason that the Gilded Kingdom had refused to sell the magical crystal cannons previously was because they had been hostile towards each other. Be it the peace supporters or the war supporters, they wouldn't do such a silly thing as to benefit their enemies. However, the Gilded Kingdom had now completely given up on going to war, and was instead fully committed to building good relationships with Lin Li. Naturally, they would no longer make any excuses in fulfilling the deal with Lin Li. In fact, in order to show their sincerity, the Gilded Kingdom had even specially deployed some large cargo ships in hopes that Lin Li would be satisfied. However, to Lin Li, the Gilded Kingdom's approach was obviously a little redundant. He shook his head, looked at a Jefferson who was full of anticipation, and said, "No, Lord Jefferson, I really appreciate His Majesty's kind intentions, but that's not what I'm going to talk to you about. Previously, I've already informed Grand Duke Viti that you guys only have to prepare as many magical crystal cannons as possible without having to worry about the problem of transportation. Jefferson was baffled. Does the Tower of Dusk secretly own a huge fleet? Or have they already discussed and reached an agreement with some sea merchant to settle the transportation issue? More importantly, he said to prepare as many magical crystal cannons. Exactly how many does he need? President Flick, we still have a considerable number of magical crystal cannons in stock, so please rest assured about this matter. Also, do you really not need our help in transporting the cannons? Even if we disassemble the magical crystal cannons, the parts will still require a large transportation capacity to be transported. Jefferson had no choice but to remind Lin Li once more so that Lin Li wouldn't find any fault with them again. However, Lin Li waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "No need for that. I just want to remind you guys that you don't need to consider the transportation issues, and should just focus on providing me with enough magical crystal cannons." Seeing that Lin Li had repeatedly reminded him to prepare enough magical crystal cannons, Jefferson couldn't help but ask with some curiosity, "In that case, President Flick, how many magical crystal cannons do you need?" Lin Li really couldn't give an exact answer about the number of magical crystal cannons he needed. Given the almost infinite space in the Ring of Endless Storm, he could definitely fit as many magical crystal cannons as the Gilded Kingdom could provide. If he told them the truth, they would probably really be frightened, and when the time came, they would find some excuses to turn him down again. Hence, when faced with Jefferson's question, Lin Li didn't answer directly, and instead smilingly said, "Please rest assured that we won't shortchange you in terms of the price. I just hope that you won't disappoint me when the time comes." Although he did not get a clear answer, Jefferson thought that Lin Li probably wouldn't ask for an exaggerated number of magical crystal cannons, and thus he didn't dwell on the matter any further. Hence, he agreed to complete the deal with Lin Li after the ceremony ended on the day of the founding celebration. He then left the embassy. After seeing Jefferson off, Lin Li continued to train and teach the inscribers of the Octopus clan while waiting for the arrival of the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration. 2 days later, it was finally the day of the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration, and the atmosphere outside was extremely lively. Lin Li took Connorus and the others with him to the palace of the Gilded Kingdom under Jefferson's lead. Apart from Lin Li, the representatives of various sea clans had also gathered in the royal palace at this moment. Even Queen Halia and Prince Cleve of the Siren clan, as well as Great Monarch Hegel of the Octopus clan, had arrived a day in advance. After exchanging pleasantries with his acquaintances for a while, Lin Li and the rest boarded the floats that the Gilded Kingdom had specially prepared for the founding celebration this time. For the guests, it was a great honor to be able to board the floats and receive the worship of the nationals of the Gilded Kingdom together with King Bradler. Only the 7 most powerful sea clans, and the 3 great human kingdoms had the right to do that. As the president of a small and unknown force, Lin Li actually received the same treatment as the 7 overlords of the sea, and the representatives of the 3 human kingdoms. Clearly, the Gilded Kingdom valued him greatly. However, many people were aware that Lin Li was an inscriber, so they weren't too surprised by such an arrangement. The large caravan set off from the square in front of the royal palace, and traveled along the avenue of the capital, all the way outside the city. Both sides of the avenue were crowded with the nationals of the Gilded Kingdom, who were all dressed in festive clothing, and wearing smiles on their faces. They were all praising and giving their blessings to the Gilded Kingdom loudly. Lin Li couldn't quite get used to such a scene. Not only were they attracting the attention of everyone, it was too noisy here, and Lin Li even regretted accepting the Gilded Kingdom's invitation. Had he known earlier that this would happen, he would have just gone straight to the celebration venue and waited there. Fortunately, after the caravan left the city, the number of citizens on both sides of the avenue gradually decreased. The honor guards then stood neatly in rows there. The military band played music while marching. The honor guards looked extremely majestic, and the horses they were riding were trotting in sync, causing the ground to tremble. There was also a portion of nationals that followed behind the caravan, all ready to go to the square for the celebration. Although they were not organized or led by anyone, they sang the Gilded Kingdom's national anthem and similar songs together with the accompaniment of the military band. As the caravan proceeded, more and more nationals joined the line, boosting the festive mood to the climax. It took half a day for the caravan to arrive at Hepra Square, where the ceremony was held. Hepra was the first king of the kingdom, and the most revered person in the hearts of all the nationals of the kingdom. Hence, be it the capital of the kingdom, or the square where the celebration was held, they were both named after Hepra. Hepra Square occupied a large area, consisting of 1/10 of the total area of the Gilded Kingdom. It was absolutely second to none even in Anral. The ground of the square was paved with lazurite of the best quality, which was even more extravagant than gold. Even a legendary powerhouse would barely be able to damage the ground of the square. There were several 100-meter-tall statues in the square, and they resembled mountains from a distance. The tallest statue in the middle was a statue of King Hupra, the first king of the Gilded Kingdom. On its right, there were statues of the founding fathers of the kingdom, whose families were now the few existing senatorial families of the Gilded Kingdom. To the bewilderment of most people, the ancestral statue of the giant whale family that had once started the rebellion was still present in the square. Some said that it was because the royal family of the Gilded Kingdom was very magnanimous, and wouldn't erase the great achievements of the ancestors just because of the whale family's rebellion. However, some people guessed that there was still a greater significance behind the existence of these statues, which wasn't for the future generations to revere and look up to. At this point, Hupra Square was heavily decorated, and the ground was spotless too, so much that even the reflection of the people there could be seen. The several statues had also been cleaned and maintained well, looking as good as new. There were also decorative ribbons. At this point, the teams from various places had already gathered there a long time ago. There were military squads as well as civilian teams who were performing for the celebration. On the other side of the square, a viewing deck that was more than 10 meters tall had already been erected. The royals of the Gilded Kingdom and the representatives of the various forces were all watching the founding celebration from the viewing deck. The caravan stopped in front of the viewing deck, and King Bradler alighted from a celebratory float together with the important members of the royal family. They then went up the stairs as Lin Li and the rest stepped onto the deck under the lead of ushers. After everything was prepared, the ceremonial minister in charge of the ceremony announced the start of the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration using sound-amplifying magic props. The military bands on both sides of the observation deck began playing some celebratory music, while the first procession began to enter the square. Lin Li had witnessed major events such as the National Day Parade in the world that he transmigrated from, which was extremely spectacular. However, compared to the current celebration in the Gilded Kingdom, the National Day Parade seemed to be rather inferior. Although there would be performances with a variety of weapons at the National Parade of the world he belonged to before transmigrating, as well as tanks, other military vehicles, and fighter jets, Lin Li felt that the Gilded Kingdom's celebration was much more spectacular. Perhaps because he had never seen the Gilded Kingdom's celebration before. For example, the crisp and fast trotting of the horses on the lazurite ground of the square was just like mighty music. All the knights were dressed in colorful armor and pointing their spear diagonally at the sky in a neat formation, making it look like a forest of spears. There were heavily armored knights, infantry regiments, squads carrying spears and crossbows, and so on. Although there were no tanks or fighter jets in the Gilded Kingdom, there was still a great visual impact when they walked past the front of the observation deck in neat formations. After the military procession, the civilians' processions began to enter the square one after another. Compared to the neat and spectacular formations of the military squads, they were much livelier, and their processions were themed around sacrifice. The performers were dressed in various outfits and performed scenes that were familiar to the nationals of the Gilded Kingdom, such as fighting amidst the wind and waves, battles against calamities, and so on. The festivities continued into the evening, and the clouds in the sky were all gilded with a golden hue at sunset. Everything seemed to be proceeding very smoothly. However, Lin Li, who was standing on the observation platform, felt that the atmosphere around him didn't seem to feel very festive anymore. Many people, including Bradler, no longer seemed as gleeful as before. Instead, they were somewhat worried. That made Lin Li a little puzzled. Isn't this the most important day for the Gilded Kingdom? Why do Bradler and the others seem so worried and dismayed? Are they not satisfied with this celebration? At this moment, Lin Li saw Grand Duke Vidi, who was standing near them. He kept his volume down and called Grand Duke Vidi over. Grand Duke Vidi, why does it seem that you guys aren't quite happy? If it's because you guys don't want to celebrate the founding of the kingdom, you can just choose not to. It's not like someone will force you to do it, right? The Gilded Kingdom had gone to such great lengths to hold a founding celebration for the kingdom, and even invited the bigwigs of various forces to attend it. Now that they were already halfway into the celebration, the people of the Gilded Kingdom were displeased instead. Thus, Lin Li felt that it would be pointless to hold the celebration if it made them upset. President Flick, please don't get the wrong idea. Upon hearing Lin Li's words, Grand Duke Vidi also sensed that his reaction wasn't quite appropriate. Thus, he had no choice but to say with a bitter smile, actually, we don't know if we should be worried about this matter, either. After all, it's a legend that has been passed on for countless years. What legend is it? Lin Li couldn't help but be curious as he wondered, just what kind of legend is it? It actually made the people of the Gilded Kingdom so worried that they can't even celebrate such an important and joyous occasion. Grand Duke Vidi shook his head, and rather awkwardly said, I'm not too sure about the details, but the legend has it that the ancestors once predicted that a great disaster would strike during the founding celebration this year. However, there was no way for us to prove it, so all we can do is keep our guard up and stay alert. As the celebration progressed, Lin Li seemed to have vaguely smelled the odor of sulfur in the air, seemingly because he had heard Grand Duke Vitus' explanation. If it was nighttime now, and the celebratory fireworks had been set off, so there would definitely be a sulfuric odor. But the thing was that there wasn't any fireworks display at the moment. Where is the smell of sulfur coming from? Lin Li felt that the smell of sulfur was gradually getting more and more intense, and at this point, he was already certain that he wasn't imagining it. As far as he knew, only a certain type of worm or abyssal demon would emit a strong sulfuric odor as they appeared. However, there were no worms or abyssal demons here. Soon, the people on the observatory platform also seemed to have smelled the sulfuric odor, and the faces of the people of the Gilded Kingdom became more and more sullen too. At this moment, Bradler said a few words to the people next to him, after which the performance in the square came to a halt before it was finished. Under the arrangement of the military, the people from various places quickly left the square, which soon became empty. The military squads that participated in the event also dropped their ceremonial props and got into a battle formation in the square, all ready to fight at any time. Those who did not know the truth were unaware of what was going on and merely thought that it was part of the celebration. It was common for the Gilded Kingdom to showcase their military power in front of the guests of the founding celebrations in the past. It wasn't surprising that the Gilded Kingdom's army would get into a battle formation now. Connorus, do you feel it? Lin Li turned his head and looked to the side. Given Connorus' identity, he had to be extremely familiar with the abyssal demons. Lin Li wondered if the sulfuric odor came from a worm or abyssal demon. At this point, Connorus' expression became rather grave too. Hesitating somewhat, he said, "There seems to be the smell of the abyss in this aura. It does seem familiar to me." At this juncture, the ground suddenly began trembling violently, and cracks began to appear in the lazurite ground due to the compression and distortion. Something large protruded from the ground in the center of the square and started heaving up and down like it was alive. The sudden change made the scene suddenly become extremely chaotic. The military squads that were on standby could barely maintain their balance amidst the violent tremors. Fortunately, the civilian teams had long retreated to the periphery of the square. Otherwise, the scene would have been even more chaotic. With the appearance of the strange situation in Upper Square, the sulfuric odor became increasingly strong. At the same time, countless thick, dark clouds gathered in the sky in the blink of an eye. They were piling up and seemed to be about to crush their heads. Countless sanguine rays of lightning bounced about in the gray clouds, with the sounds of thunder mixed with howling that resembled that of ghosts, making the space feel like hell. The large protrusion in the middle of the square was arching up like a small hill, causing the lazurite on the ground that was worth tens of thousands of gold coins to shatter. Afterwards, it collapsed again as if it had lost all its power. The force generated by the movement began to spread outwards in all directions like ripples, as if the ground under the square had turned into the surface of the sea. Finally, the protrusion in the middle suddenly erupted, seemingly having accumulated enough power. An opening seemed to have formed at the top. Immediately afterwards, hot lava spurted into the sky in large amounts. All of a sudden, the ground and sky were both red because of the lava. The thick fumes of smoke also shrouded the space. The lava spurted high into the sky and scattered in all directions, just like a meteor shower. At this moment, the Gilded Kingdom's army couldn't be of any help at all. Instead, they were thrown into jeopardy by the fire rain. There were humans who were afire all over the ground, wailing and rolling around in pain. Some were also running in all directions, and countless warriors had died in the fire rain. A tall and burly figure slowly stood up in the emerging volcano amidst the fire and fog, seemingly unaffected by the lava. His body was wrapped in blazing flames that seemed to make even the lava dim in comparison. With the appearance of this figure, a massive aura that would make one's soul tremble immediately filled the space. Faced with the terrifying aura, people no longer felt a single trace of courage and were running away from the square with all their might, wishing they had an extra pair of legs. Seeing such a scene, the crowd on the observation platform became sullen. The nationals of the Gilded Kingdom were naturally upset because of the disaster, while the representatives of other forces were somewhat dissatisfied with the Gilded Kingdom's approach. In their opinion, it seemed that the Gilded Kingdom had already expected the calamity and had invited them over with the intention of having the guests tiding the hosts over the ordeal. "It's true. The prophecy is true," Bradler muttered with trembling lips as he looked at the center of the square, his face as pale as a sheet. Bradler was surrounded by the important members of the royal family and ministers, who all looked extremely flustered and hopeless. Clearly, they had more or less heard of the so-called prophecy revolving around the situation now. "Your Majesty, what exactly do you mean by prophecy?" asked a sullen and displeased Hegel, the great monarch of the Octopus clan. They already felt like they were being used for coping with the ordeal in the first place. After hearing Bradler mention the prophecy, that feeling intensified. Bradler came back to his senses, and he could tell from the facial expressions of the representatives of those forces that they had probably misunderstood something. Of course, strictly speaking, it wasn't considered a misunderstanding, because the Gilded Kingdom indeed had invited them with the intention of getting their help in case the disaster really struck. However, he clearly couldn't be honest about everything. If Bradler were to reveal that he really had such intentions, those forces would probably turn around and leave immediately. In that case, it would really be uncertain if the Gilded Kingdom could survive the predicted disaster with their own power alone. Hence, Bradler had no choice but to perk up and say to the representatives of the various forces, "I'm really sorry, but we actually didn't quite believe in this old prophecy, either. Otherwise, we would have rather changed the date of the founding celebration than let all of you go through this disaster with us." Regardless of whether it was true, Bradler's explanation was more or less effective in dispelling the suspicions of the crowd a little. After all, they had attended the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration more than once, and it wasn't that different from the previous ones this time. Although they could tell that the Gilded Kingdom had made some preparations for the celebration, it was barely of any use in the disaster. Instead, it caused the Gilded Kingdom to suffer greater losses. The warriors were all elites of the Gilded Kingdom. Although they seemed to be helpless in the face of the disaster, they were an incredibly powerful force on the battlefield. After Bradler explained to the crowd, and saw that their expressions were less sullen than before, he frantically said to Great Monarch Hegel, "Great Monarch Hegel, did you bring Masterfulix magic scroll with you? Please help our kingdom overcome this crisis." The Octopus clan had bought Lin Li's Mount Tai magic scroll at a record high price during the auction. Later on, the magic scroll's incredible power, that was comparable to that of a god, was displayed during the fight against Wild Whale Rabu. Hence, Bradler immediately thought of the magic scroll, like he had found a straw to clutch at, and hoped that Hegel would help. However, after hearing Bradler's request, Hegel shook his head with a bitter smile, and regretfully said, "Your Majesty, if you had informed us about this matter beforehand, I might have brought it here, but apart from you guys, who could have known that such a thing would happen at the celebration? I've already handed that scroll to the elders of the clan for research. When I returned 2 days ago." Hegel was telling the truth. Due to the fact that the magic scroll Mount Tai had cost the Octopus clan hundreds of millions of gold coins, Hegel didn't dare to carry it around, even though he was the great monarch of the Octopus clan. Besides, the importance of the magic scroll Mount Tai was extremely high because of its research value. No one would bring it around for no reason. Hearing Hegel's answer, Bradler and the senior members of the Gilded Kingdom turned as pale as a sheet. Well, they had themselves to blame for being doubtful of the prophecy and failing to make sufficient preparations beforehand. Otherwise, he could have borrowed the Magath from Hegel and avoided this. Seeing the expressions on the faces of Bradler and the others, Hegel felt somewhat sympathetic, even though he was displeased with the fact that they had hidden the matter from them. Hence, he reminded, "Your Majesty, although I do not have the magic scroll Mount Tai with me, don't forget that the creator of the Magath is here." Bradler and the others, who were in a panic and had become somewhat flustered because of the prophecy, forgot for a while that Lin Li, the creator of the Mount Tai magic scroll, was on the observatory deck too. After getting the reminder, Bradler hurriedly led the crowd towards Lin Li without even thanking Hegel. At this moment, Lin Li and Connorus were standing on the observatory deck and watching the developments in the middle of the square. As a tall figure emerged from the crater, the terrifying aura swept in all directions, and Connorus' face suddenly turned ashen. Even his body had begun trembling slightly. Sensing the physical changes in Connorus, Lin Li couldn't help but frown slightly and asked, "Seems like this guy is no stranger to you, Connorus." Connorus also came back to his senses at this point, and he looked at the middle of the square with lingering fear. He bitterly said, "Flick, it seems that the Gilded Kingdom is in big trouble this time. We'd better leave this place as soon as possible." Since Connorus had obtained his perfect body, he had never been timid or felt the slightest trace of fear in the face of sanctuary powerhouses. However, at this point, the first thing that came to his mind was to flee. Clearly, the man that emerged from the crater had a significant background. "Who exactly is that?" Lin Li asked curiously. "The Crimson Flames tyrant, Mozari, the monarch of the 99th level of the Abyss, and a true ancient demon deity. He's also the creator of the Endless Abyss, and the origin of all demons," Connorus exclaimed in a trembling voice. As he revealed the identity of the figure, his eyes were filled with fear that he couldn't hide. Legend had it that the endless abyss was a world of demons, created by 81 ancient demon deities several thousands of years ago. Connorus was one of them, and he mastered conspiracy and deceit. Another demon deity was the tyrant Balak, who was killed by High Lord Osric for his magical crystal, which was used in the core of the eternal furnace. However, although Connorus and the others were said to be ancient demon deities, they hadn't really ascended to godhood, and were, strictly speaking, only considered ancient demons. The only one who genuinely possessed strength at the level of gods was the leader of the 81 demon deities, Mozari the Crimson Flames tyrant, who was known as the son of the ancestral demon. Under Mozari's lead, the 81 ancient demon deities created the endless abyss and countless abyssal demons. Hence, to the abyssal demons, Mozari was their god and the ancestor of all demons. Although each floor of the endless abyss was ruled by a demon lord, the entire endless abyss was actually more like Mozari's divine kingdom, including Connorus and Balak. The 81 demon deities were more like divine servants, who helped Mozari manage his divine kingdom. Why is he appearing here? Lin Li couldn't help but have another question in mind when he heard the information about the Crimson Flames tyrant. Since the endless abyss is Mozari's divine kingdom, why would a powerful demon ancestor like him leave his divine kingdom behind and come to the endless ocean, where he got sealed and suppressed? However, Connorus had been sealed in the hammer by High Lord Osric since the middle of the Dark Age, and thus did not know much about the later developments in the endless abyss. Hence, while recalling the situation, Connorus said to Lin Li with some uncertainty, "Before I left the endless abyss, I seem to have heard some rumors that Mozari had once prepared to lead the abyssal demons to wage a war for the right and authority to rule Anral. However, when all the demons were already on standby, Mozari did not issue an order for them to strike. Legend has it that someone barged into the 99th level of the abyss and fought Mozari, who got severely injured in that battle. Barged into the 99th level of the abyss. That person." At this point, Lin Li already had a vague idea of who the person was. No one has seen that person before, but I'm guessing that that person who severely injured Mozari was probably the immortal king. At that time, Mozari wanted to challenge the High Elves' authority, but perhaps only the immortal king would have the strength to get rid of him before he really posed a threat to them, said Connorus, having made the same guess as Lin Li, who had similarly thought of the immortal king, who was almost almighty according to the legends. Staring at the figure in the middle of the square, Lin Li said, "What happened afterwards? Did you guys not see him again?" Connorus nodded, and continued, "Yes, after that, the 99th level of the abyss was closed off, and even Balak and the few most powerful demon deities couldn't step onto the 99th level again. Since then, no one had ever seen Mozari again. Even Mozari's aura gradually dissipated from the abyss, and everyone thought that he might have fallen. Now it seems that he has escaped to the endless ocean, and even formed some connection with the Gilded Kingdom, but I don't know why he's sealed here. Could it be that the immortal king has caught up with him?" Lin Li wasn't making a wild guess, because there were still many gods sealed at the bottom of the cursed island, and it was no big deal for an ancient demon deity to be sealed there. However, the ancient demon deity Mozari seemed to be rather capable as he managed to break open the seal and escape. Based on that point alone, Mozari's strength probably wasn't inferior to that of the ancient deities during his prime. Of course, Mozari wasn't in his prime now, not to mention how severe the injuries that he had sustained after fighting the opponent back then were. The way that he had been sealed here for thousands of years had to have weakened his power by a great margin. In addition to the price paid for breaking the seal, Mozari's demigod level power was at most a little greater than that of ordinary demigods. While Lin Li and Connorus were discussing Mozari's identity, King Bradler also came close to the two of them with his subordinates. As soon as they came close, they bowed to Lin Li in unison. Immediately afterwards, Bradler straightened his back and pleaded with Lin Li, "Master Flick, you're the only one who can save the Gilded Kingdom now. I hope that you can help us tide over during this disaster on the account of the countless innocent citizens of the Gilded Kingdom." Faced with such a disaster, Bradler couldn't even put on any airs of a king. Be it the peace supporters or war supporters, the facial expressions of the people who followed Bradler over became extremely complicated. None of them had expected that Lin Li, who they and the rest had despised at the beginning, would actually become the savior of the Gilded Kingdom. However, Lin Li did not immediately nod and agree to the request of Bradler and the others. Instead, he said, "Your Majesty, this seal probably isn't that simple. Did your ancestors not teach you any countermeasures?" Needless to say, Four Seasons Island was extremely important to the Gilded Kingdom. The presence of such a terrifying demon deity that was sealed on Four Seasons Island was just like a ticking time bomb. Since the ancestors of the Gilded Kingdom had predicted that this demon deity might break the seal and escape, How could they not have provided some means for their descendants to save their lives? Lin Li didn't ask that question for the sake of mocking the Gilded Kingdom, nor was he waiting to see them make a fool of themselves, but rather he felt that Mozari wouldn't be that easy to deal with. Although Mozari's current strength wasn't comparable to that which he had when he was at his prime, according to Connorus, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. A demon deity would still be a demon deity even if he was down and out. Although Lin Li had consecutively defeated numerous ancient gods on the cursed island through Garesco's test, those ancient gods were actually just the condensation of a portion of the power extracted from the real ancient gods, and some of their willpower. Strictly speaking, they were more like manifestations of the ancient gods. Although they were much stronger than Lin Li, they had miraculously not broken through Lin Li's tolerance limit. Otherwise, it would not have been a test, but a fatal encounter for Lin Li. Just because Lin Li was able to defeat those ancient god manifestations, it did not mean that he could defeat the real ancient gods. Even a powerful trump card like the Mount Tai Magath wouldn't be able to make up for the absolute difference in strength between him and the ancient gods. The power of the god that he had killed after the god had escaped the rift with difficulty simply could not be compared even to the manifestation of the ancient god. It was just more powerful than the demigod level high priest power to a certain extent. According to Connorus, the figure in the middle of the square was a true ancient demon deity and the real owner of the endless abyss. The immortal king was a powerful figure who could even kill the dragon of destruction, yet he only managed to deal Mozari a severe blow and cause him to be badly injured after entering the 99th level of the abyss. Although Lin Li didn't know why Mozari was sealed here, and whether the seal had anything to do with the immortal king, he could tell that Mozari's strength was extraordinary. Lin Li didn't think that he had really reached the level of invincibility in Anral just because he had passed Garesco's test. At the very least, there were 3 people he knew of that he wasn't confident enough in defeating, and they were the 3 arbitrators of the Supreme Council. Mozari was the same. Although Lin Li was not necessarily afraid of him, he wasn't confident of winning either, and even if he could defeat Mozari, he would definitely have to pay a huge price for doing so. If he was the one being forced into a desperate situation, he would of course fight with all his might at all costs. However, if it was for the sake of the Gilded Kingdom, he would have to consider if it was worth it or not. However, at this moment, there were once again changes in the square, and Lin Li didn't need answers from Bradler and the others anymore. It seemed that Mozari was about to completely break the seal when the several tall statues at the side of the square suddenly came to life. They rose from the ground one after another and strode towards the center of the square. Is that an alchemy colossus? After being surprised, Lin Li shook his head to reject his guess because he didn't notice the distinctive features of an alchemy colossus in the statues. Since they were not alchemy colossuses, Lin Li thought of another powerful magic weapon, and that was giant divine soldiers. Although they were both enormous in size, there was essentially a great difference between a giant divine soldier and an alchemy colossus. A giant divine soldier was not created by piecing various parts together with alchemical techniques, but rather it was a magical stone weapon. When deactivated, the giant divine soldier was nothing more than a statue that didn't have any joints or special settings. However, after being activated, the giant divine soldier would gain mobility and have the ability to move its limbs freely like a human. It was just like a giant in a shell made of stone. The alchemy colossus was created and powered with alchemical technology, while the giant divine soldier was driven purely with mana, as if it were a solidified earth elemental magic spell. The giant divine soldiers, just like Lin Li's angels of light and dark, could only be activated within the domain, and would be immobile beyond it. However, their magic power was different. The giant divine soldiers of the Gilded Kingdom all had powerful strength that was at the sanctuary level, but no one knew whom they were created by. However, the giant divine soldiers were probably the Gilded Kingdom's greatest trump card, and the reason they could have a foothold in the endless ocean. The giant divine soldiers quickly rushed towards the ancient demon deity, Mozari, and swung their fists, which were like battering rams, at Mozari's body. At this point, it seemed that Mozari had yet to break free from the shackles of the seal as his feet were still in the crater of the volcano. Faced with the siege of the giant divine soldiers, Mozari roared in exasperation and swung his strong and muscular arm like he was swatting flies. With a loud bang, Mozari's arm collided with the fists of the giant divine soldiers to create a violent tremor that shook even the surrounding black smoke and flames away. At this point, Mozari appeared amidst the rolling fumes of black smoke. Mozari had the typical features and characteristics of an abyssal demon, with a pair of scimitar-like horns on his head and a pair of gigantic black wings on his back. According to Connorus, most of the powerful demons in the endless abyss were actually created by Mozari, who modeled them after his own appearance. That was the reason that he was called the ancestor of the demons. With just a wave of Mozari's arm, some enormous giant divine soldiers were swept backwards and retreated rapidly. Fortunately, there was more than one giant divine soldier surrounding Mozari. The others were fearlessly attacking Mozari, leaving him with no time to break free from the seal. Although the several giant divine soldiers possessed sanctuary-level power, Mozari was a real ancient deity. Mozari's power might be far less than that from his prime, but it was more than what ordinary sanctuary masters could compare to. The crazy siege of the giant divine soldiers would only be slightly effective in restraining Mozari, and it would take a greater power to reseal this powerful ancient demon deity. Bradler and others had also noticed that point, so the tension on their faces didn't ease up. Instead, they eagerly said to Lin Li, "Masterfully, the ancestors have left those several giant divine soldiers to us as the most powerful means for dealing with the crisis. However, as you can see, this power is simply not enough to help the giant divine soldiers overcome this crisis. Your Majesty, it's not that I don't want to attack, but this demon is many times more powerful than the wild whale Rabu that we encountered previously. Even if we use the Mount Tai Mageth, we won't be able to suppress him." Of course, Lin Li was not entirely telling the truth, but he obviously wouldn't go all out for the Gilded Kingdom. Hearing Lin Li's words, a trace of despair appeared on Bradler's face, and he said in disbelief, How is that possible?" For Bradler, Lin Li was perhaps the only hope for saving the Gilded Kingdom, and now that Lin Li had said that, who else could help the Gilded Kingdom through this disaster? Was their only option really to just pray to the gods? "How about you guys try your best to stall this demon? I need all the information you have about this demon. Maybe I can find a way to deal with him using it." Although Lin Li was a sanctuary powerhouse who had almost reached the divine realm, he hadn't reached the point of being able to treat all beings like ants. If possible, he would save the Gilded Kingdom from a complete destruction, under the condition that he didn't have to pay a huge price for it. In fact, even if Lin Li did not intervene in this matter, he believed that it was definitely possible to survive this crisis for the time being with the joint forces of the Gilded Kingdom and the other forces. After all, although this matter happened in the Gilded Kingdom, it did not involve only the Gilded Kingdom. If Mozari were to break free from the seal, he would definitely be a massive threat to the various forces of the Endless Ocean. Although the ancient demon deity was powerful, it would still be possible to drive him away if the nearly 100 powerhouses of the forces present were to go all out and fight Mozari to the death. Of course, if they were to do that, it would be impossible to keep Four Seasons Island intact. The millions of civilians on Four Seasons Island would also become the victims of this disaster. Lin Li believed that neither Bradler nor the members of the other forces would be willing to see things develop to that point.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.